Tonight, we are walking beneath a sky filled with ancient stars, far above the quiet waters of the Aegean Sea. The world appears peaceful. Moonlight rests upon marble temples. Soft waves touch distant shores. Olive trees whisper in the night wind, and sacred fires glow within lonely hilltop shrines. Yet beneath this calm surface, something stirs. The ancient Greeks believed that the earth remembered everything. Every triumph, every wound, every broken promise. And somewhere beneath mountains, valleys, and forgotten caverns, an old memory is beginning to wake. Tonight, you will follow Zeus, king of Olympus, into one of the greatest struggles of Greek mythology. Not against titans whose defeat already belongs to an earlier age, but against a new generation of enemies born from the earth itself. Before we begin, if you enjoy these journeys into the ancient world, consider liking the video and subscribing. And if you feel comfortable, share your location and local time in the comments below. Now let the day drift away. Allow the stars above Greece to guide your thoughts, and together you step into the age when even the gods feared what might rise from the depths of the world. The night air feels cool against your skin as you climb a narrow path leading toward a mountain sanctuary. Far below, small villages sleep beneath silver moonlight. Dogs rest beside stone walls. Fishing boats rock gently in sheltered harbors. The smell of olive oil and wood smoke drifts upward from distant homes. Everything seems as it should, yet the silence feels unusually deep, as though the world itself is listening. You continue upward until the sea disappears behind dark hills. Ahead rises Olympus, not simply a mountain, a boundary between worlds. To mortal eyes, Olympus appears as a towering peak crowned with cloud and mist. But Greek storytellers imagined something greater, hidden beyond ordinary sight. There stood shining halls built for immortal beings. Golden columns reflected eternal light. Palaces overlooked endless skies. Sacred fires never faded. And there, upon a throne of power earned through war, sat Zeus, king of gods, lord of thunder, ruler of heaven. His victories were famous across the world. Long ago, he had overthrown his father, the Titan Cronus. He had freed his divine brothers and sisters. He had defeated ancient powers older than memory. The Olympians ruled because Zeus had won. At least, that was how the story was usually told. But victory often leaves shadows behind. The Greeks understood this. No conflict ever truly ends. Every battle creates new grief. Every triumph leaves someone mourning. And no one carried greater sorrow than Gaia, Mother Earth herself. You walk now through an imagined sacred grove dedicated to her. Ancient oaks rise toward the stars. Roots twist through dark soil. The scent of damp earth fills the air. Among the Greeks, Gaia was not merely a goddess. She was the living earth beneath every footstep. The mountains were part of her body. The valleys belonged to her. Every field and forest existed within her vast presence. And Gaia remembered. She remembered the Titans. She remembered the ancient struggles that shaped creation. Most of all, she remembered her children who had suffered. The stories differ in certain details. Historians continue to debate how various regions of Greece understood these myths. Yet many traditions agree on one important truth. Gaia believed that Zeus had become too much like the rulers who came before him. Powerful, victorious, certain of his right to rule. As the years passed after the Titan War, this concern grew within her. At first, it seemed only a distant unease, like a cloud barely visible on the horizon. But beneath the earth, feelings rarely remain still forever. You move deeper into the grove. Moonlight filters through branches overhead. An owl calls somewhere in the darkness. Then silence returns. Ancient listeners may have wondered something troubling. Could Zeus truly maintain order forever? Or was every king destined to face rebellion? The question lingered like smoke, even among the gods. On Olympus, celebrations had long ended. The great victories belonged to the past. Immortals returned to their duties. Apollo guided prophecy. Athena watched over wisdom. Poseidon ruled the sea. Demeter blessed the harvest. The world seemed stable. Yet Zeus himself remained watchful. Power teaches caution, especially to those who remember war. You find yourself standing beside an imagined balcony overlooking endless clouds. Far beyond, distant lightning flickers. Not a storm, only a brief flash, A reminder. Zeus gazes into darkness. The king of gods understands something many others ignore. Threats rarely announce themselves openly. They begin as whispers, rumors, dreams, small signs. And recently, strange signs had appeared. Sacred birds altered their migration. Certain springs produced water with an unusual taste. Priests reported troubling dreams. In one version of the story, a shepherd claimed he heard voices beneath a hillside. Another tradition tells of tremors felt deep within caves. No one knew their meaning, or perhaps no one wished to know. The Greeks often saw messages within unusual events. An unexpected storm, a strange birth, a disturbing dream. Such things might be warnings sent by divine forces. Yet, interpreting them remained difficult. Even the wisest priests could disagree. And that uncertainty made the signs more unsettling. A warm wind passes across the mountain. Clouds drift slowly overhead. You hear distant thunder, very faint, almost imagined. Zeus hears it too. His thoughts return to an old truth. The earth never forgets. The king remembers battles against Cronus. He remembers the imprisoned Titans. He remembers enemies buried beneath the world. Some dangers were defeated, others merely contained. The distinction mattered, because prisons can weaken, chains can break, and wounds can reopen. As night deepens, Zeus seeks counsel. The halls of Olympus glow with torchlight reflected upon polished stone. Gods move through corridors lined with gold and ivory. Music drifts from distant chambers. Yet, beneath the beauty lies unease. Athena notices it first. Wisdom often recognizes danger before others do. She sees the tension hidden behind Zeus's calm expression. She asks no questions. Not yet, but she watches. Elsewhere, Hera senses the same change. The queen of Olympus understands her husband better than most. She knows that Zeus becomes quiet when troubled. And tonight, he is unusually silent. Far below the mountain, another presence watches as well. Gaia, the Earth Mother, ancient, patient, endless. Deep beneath forests and mountains, she feels every root and river. She hears every footstep. She remembers every injustice. And within her vast awareness, something begins to move. Not openly, not yet. Like seeds waiting beneath winter soil, waiting for the proper season, waiting for the proper sign. Some ancient storytellers claimed that Gaia had already made a decision. Others believed her anger was still growing. No one could know with certainty. That uncertainty survives even now. It lingers within the myth, like a hidden path disappearing into mist. Yet one thing is clear. The peaceful age after the Titan War is ending. The first cracks have appeared. The first warnings have been given. And somewhere beneath mountains, older than memory, forces are awakening. For now, however, the world remains quiet. The stars continue their slow journey across the heavens. Sacred fires burn steadily within lonely temples. Waves strike distant harbor walls. Sleep settles across villages and islands. But beneath the earth, deep below every sleeping home, an ancient heartbeat has begun to quicken. And neither gods nor mortals yet understand what is coming. You continue walking through the quiet slopes beneath Olympus, where the night feels heavier now. The air carries a deeper stillness, as if the world is holding its breath without knowing why. Somewhere far below your steps, the earth shifts in ways you cannot see. The ancient Greeks believed Gaia was not a distant symbol. She was presence itself. Every stone, every root, every mountain ridge belonged to her living awareness. When she felt sorrow, the ground itself seemed to grow cold. And tonight, that sorrow is turning into intention. A dream begins to unfold within the mythic world. Not your dream, but something older drifting through sacred sleep across the lands of Greece. You see vast caverns beneath the mountains of Phrygia and Arcadia. Darkness stretches endlessly, broken only by veins of glowing mineral light. The silence is ancient, almost unbearable. Then movement. Stone cracks softly. Dust falls like slow rain. And within the deep places of the earth, something begins to awaken. The giants. In some traditions, they are born from Gaia's anger at the imprisonment of her Titan children. In others, they emerge from the blood of ancient beings scattered across creation. Scholars continue to debate the exact origin preserved in fragmented hymns and temple inscriptions, but all versions agree on one truth. They are not ordinary beings. Their bodies rise from the earth itself, heavy with mineral strength and storm-born rage. Some are shaped like warriors carved from granite. Others seem almost human, yet distorted by immense unnatural scale. And as they rise, they carry memory. Memory of imprisonment, memory of loss, memory of a world ruled by Olympian authority. You stand within this vision as if walking through it, feeling the tremor beneath your feet. The giants do not speak at first. They listen, as though the earth itself is teaching them what they are meant to become. Above them, Gaia's voice is not heard in words, but in sensation. A pressure in the stone, a warmth beneath the soil, a guiding sorrow that feels almost like love. Yet love, when twisted by grief, can become something far more dangerous. A warning spreads through the deep places, a prophecy forming slowly within the myth. No power in heaven or sea can defeat the giants alone. Only when gods and mortals act together will balance be restored. The meaning of this prophecy remains debated among ancient poets. Some say it was spoken directly by Gaia. Others believe it was later interpreted by priests of Delphi, seeking to explain the war after it happened. You feel the uncertainty as part of the story itself, like mist refusing to settle into a single shape. Now the dream shifts. You are no longer beneath the earth. You stand within the temple of Delphi. The air is thick with burning laurel leaves. Smoke curls upward toward carved stone ceilings. The Pythia, seated above a sacred fissure, trembles as visions pass through her body. Her voice does not belong entirely to her. It carries something older, something heavier. Zeus listens. His presence is not physical here. Yet, the weight of his attention bends the space of the vision. The oracle speaks in fragments, not titans, not gods alone. A pause, a breath like wind through stone. Earthborn, rising, many, and the sky will not hold them back. The message fractures into silence. No clear instruction follows. Only warning, only inevitability. When Zeus receives such prophecies, he does not react quickly. Immortals rarely rush, but inside him, thought moves like thunder gathering in distant clouds. He remembers the Titan War again. He remembers how even the greatest gods struggled when order itself was uncertain. And now, something new is forming beneath the world he once believed secured. You move with him through the halls of Olympus. The marble floors reflect torchlight like water. Every step echoes softly through corridors where gods pretend certainty. Athena walks beside Zeus for a time. She does not speak at first. Then quietly she asks a question that carries more weight than any declaration. If the earth itself rises against us, what will we call it? Zeus does not answer immediately. Outside the palace, clouds drift across the sky like slow-moving thoughts. Finally he replies, "Another war." But even as he speaks, the word feels incomplete. Not entirely correct, not entirely wrong. In distant fields below, mortals begin to notice changes they cannot explain. Livestock refuse to enter certain valleys. Birds circle too long above ruined temples. Children wake from dreams of trembling mountains. Farmers whisper that the ground feels alive beneath their feet. They do not know what name to give it, only that something is approaching. Something old, something patient, something vast. Meanwhile, far beneath all of this, Gaia continues shaping her intention, not as a single moment, but as a slow accumulation of grief and memory. The giants she awakens are not merely weapons. They are answers to questions the world has never resolved. What happens when creation is ruled too tightly? What happens when order forgets the cost of its own stability? Ancient poets rarely agreed on her motives. Some describe her as protector of balance, others as grieving mother seeking justice. Still others suggest something more complex, where love and anger cannot be separated. You sense that complexity now, like roots spreading in unseen soil. Above the earth, Zeus begins to prepare. He sends messages to Poseidon, to Athena, to Apollo. The gods assemble without fully knowing why. There is no declared war yet, only anticipation, only tension forming slowly across the divine world. And somewhere in the silence between storms, a second prophecy appears. Not from Delphi this time, but from a lesser-known shrine near the coast of Asia Minor. A priest falls into trance and speaks a single line before collapsing. The earth will walk again. No explanation follows, only silence, only fear. The phrase spreads quietly among temple attendants and sailors who hear it. Some dismiss it as madness, others remember it. You continue walking through this unfolding myth, feeling the boundary between dream and reality grow thin. The giants are not yet fully born into the world above, but their presence is already changing it. Mountains feel heavier, seas feel deeper, the sky itself seems to wait. And Zeus, watching from Olympus, understands something he has not spoken aloud. This is not simply rebellion. It is return of something that was never fully gone. The world holds this thought in silence as night deepens. Clouds gather above distant peaks. Lightning flickers without thunder. And beneath every temple, every field, every sleeping city, the earth remembers what it has been asked to forget. You descend now not through space, but through memory itself. The world of the gods fades slightly above you, and the earth beneath begins to feel closer, more intimate, as if it is breathing beside your ear. Somewhere in the deep places beneath Arcadia and Lydia, the giants are no longer only forming. They are learning. Their bodies settle into shape slowly, as if the earth is teaching them how to exist in gravity and pain. Stone becomes muscle. Mineral veins become something like veins of blood. Their eyes open not as mortal eyes do, but as awareness emerging from darkness. Ancient storytellers disagreed about how many there were. Some say dozens, others say hundreds. A few sacred hymns suggest they were countless, like fragments of anger given form. What remains consistent is their origin. They are not foreign to the world. They are born from it. You walk among them in this vision, feeling the vibration of their awakening beneath your feet. The first giant to rise lifts his head toward the unseen sky. He does not yet know what sky is, only that something above him exists, something that feels distant, radiant, and absolute. A memory stirs within him that does not belong to him. The memory of imprisonment, of chains older than time, of voices calling from beyond stone walls. This is where the myth becomes uncertain again. Some traditions claim Gaia whispered memories into them directly. Others say the earth itself carries emotional residue, shaping consciousness from pressure and heat. No one can fully resolve this contradiction, and perhaps it is meant to remain unresolved, because the giants themselves are contradictions, living beings formed from resentment and protection at once. Above them, far beyond layers of stone and silence, Olympus remains unaware of their full awakening. But Zeus feels something, not a sound, not a vision. Something closer to tension in the fabric of reality. You stand beside him now in the great hall where gods gather. Columns of white marble rise into heights that seem endless. Torches burn with steady golden flame that never flickers despite windless air. The Olympian gods are present, though not all at once. Athena stands near the center, her posture calm, eyes constantly observing patterns others miss. Apollo lingers near the entrance, as if listening to distant music only he can hear. Poseidon's presence feels heavier, like pressure beneath the floor. Hera watches Zeus more than the room itself. And Ares, restless as always, seems already half inside a war not yet declared. Zeus finally speaks. His voice carries the weight of someone trying to name something that resists naming. The earth moves beneath us. No one responds immediately, not because they disagree, but because they understand what it implies. Athena is the first to speak. If Gaia moves against Olympus, she says quietly, then this is not rebellion as we know it. Her words linger in the air like smoke. Ares laughs once sharp and uncertain. Then we fight it. Simple, direct, incomplete. Hera's voice cuts through more carefully. And if it is not only her will, but the will of what she has created, silence deepens. Even Poseidon does not answer. Outside the hall, thunder rolls far away across unseen seas, a distant omen, a reminder that water, earth, and sky are never truly separate. You begin to understand something the myth is carefully revealing. This is not a conflict with a single enemy. It is a conflict with the structure of the world itself. Zeus turns away from the council. For a moment, he stands alone near an open terrace. Clouds drift beneath Olympus like shifting oceans. Lightning flickers in the distance without forming storms. He remembers older days, before Olympus ruled fully, before even the Titans fell. He remembers uncertainty as a constant companion. And now it returns. Below, within the hidden layers of the earth, The giants begin to step. Their first movements are not coordinated. They are experimental, as if the world itself is learning how to walk through them. One giant presses a hand against stone and feels resistance. Another listens to the sound of his own breath echoing through caverns. A third looks upward and senses something like pressure from above, as if the sky itself pushes down. And in that pressure, a desire forms. Not fully formed thought, but direction. Upward, always upward. Gaia does not command them in words. She guides them through sensation, through instinct, through inherited memory of what was taken and what was buried. Yet, even within her guidance, uncertainty remains. Some ancient poets suggest Gaia did not intend destruction. Others insist she understood exactly what she was awakening. Historians continue to debate whether the giants represent chaos or correction. Perhaps both interpretations are correct. You feel this ambiguity as part of the world itself, like fog that refuses to settle into clarity. Above, Zeus begins to sense patterns. The signs are no longer isolated. They form a sequence: dreams among mortals, tremors beneath temples, strange behavior in sacred animals, prophecies from multiple shrines speaking similar warnings. The earth will walk again. The phrase returns like an echo from different mouths. Even Apollo, god of prophecy, grows silent for a moment when he hears it again. Silence is sometimes the clearest form of recognition. Athena joins Zeus on the terrace. Wind moves gently through her hair, though it does not disturb the calm of her expression. "You feel it too," she says. Zeus does not deny it. "Yes." A pause. Then Athena speaks carefully, as if choosing each word like a strategist before battle. "Then we must assume the giants will rise fully into the upper world." Zeus looks toward the horizon, where sky meets unseen distance. "I have faced what rises before," he says, "but never something born from the earth itself." Below, the giants take another step in their slow emergence. Stone fractures in distant caverns. Underground rivers shift course. Entire chambers collapse as something vast begins to move through them. Yet, no one above hears the sound. Not yet. And that silence becomes part of the tension, because in myth, silence is never absence. It is preparation. A final omen spreads through the world in this section of the story. In a remote village near Mount Sipylus, a shepherd reports seeing a shadow pass over the sun while no eclipse occurs. He describes it as a shape too large to understand. Later scholars suggest it may be poetic exaggeration. Others insist it reflects a real ancient observation of atmospheric distortion. The truth remains unknown. As with so much of this myth, certainty slips just beyond reach, and that uncertainty is what keeps it alive. Zeus returns to the council. Decision must be made. Not yet war, but preparation. And somewhere beneath their discussion, beneath marble halls and golden light, the earth continues its slow awakening. Step by step, stone by stone, memory by memory, the giants are beginning to understand the world they will rise into, and the world above is only beginning to understand them. You find yourself drawn away from the deep caverns of the giants, carried upward through layers of mist and forgotten air, until the world of mortals comes into focus once more. It is here, among human voices and fragile stone cities, that the first clear warnings take shape. Delphi rests upon a mountainside where the earth seems to breathe through hidden cracks. Cypress trees sway slowly above sacred paths. The scent of burning laurel drifts through the air like a thought that refuses to settle. You walk toward the temple of Apollo. The stone steps are worn by generations of feet. Pilgrims arrive with questions they cannot answer alone. Kings arrive with fears they cannot admit aloud. And somewhere beneath it all, the oracle waits. Inside the inner chamber, the air is thick with incense and expectation. Light filters through narrow openings, falling across carved stone like pale gold. The Pythia sits above a fissure in the earth, a place where the Greeks believe divine breath rises from the world itself. She trembles slightly before speaking, not from fear, from contact, a presence moving through her that is not entirely hers. You stand beside her in this moment of unfolding vision, and the world shifts again. Zeus is not physically present, but his awareness is drawn here, as if prophecy itself reaches for him across distance. The oracle inhales. The air changes, and she speaks, not in complete sentences. but in broken fragments, as if meaning itself struggles to form. Not titans, not yet forgotten. A pause heavy as stone, born of earth. Children of pressure and grief. The torches flicker, though no wind enters the chamber. Many rising, seeking what was buried. Silence returns for a heartbeat. Then another fragment, sharper, now almost urgent. The sky will not contain what the earth remembers. The words settle into the room like falling ash, and then the oracle collapses back into stillness. The prophecy is not complete. It never is. Ancient Greeks understood this absence as part of the message itself. Meaning arrives in fragments, because truth cannot be fully spoken without breaking the listener. You feel the weight of unfinished knowledge pressing against the silence. Outside the temple, the world continues unaware. Merchants call out in the marketplace. Children run between stone columns. Priests carry offerings toward altars. Life continues as it always has. But within the higher realms, Zeus receives the echo of what was spoken. The gods of Olympus do not hear prophecy as mortals do. They feel it, like pressure behind thought, like a distant thunder forming before clouds appear. Zeus stands once again within the great hall of Olympus. The prophecy has reached him. Athena is already there. She speaks first. Then it has begun. Her voice carries no surprise, only recognition. Poseidon enters shortly after sea salt, still seeming to cling to his presence. A disturbance in the deep waters, he says quietly, as if something large shifts beneath even the ocean floor. Hera watches Zeus reading the tension in his stillness. Apollo says nothing at first, but his eyes reflect something unsettled. Vision without clarity. A prophecy even he cannot fully interpret. Zeus finally speaks. The oracle confirms what we have sensed. A pause. Then the truth becomes heavier. The earth itself is no longer still. At this, Ares straightens, as if war has already been declared in his mind. Then we strike before it rises fully. Athena's gaze sharpens. And if we strike too early, we risk breaking what is not yet fully formed. A subtle tension emerges between strategy and impulse, between wisdom and force, between timing and inevitability. Zeus raises a hand slightly. The room falls into controlled silence. He is thinking, and thinking for Zeus often carries the weight of worlds. You move with him now beyond the hall onto terraces where Olympus overlooks endless sky. Clouds drift slowly beneath the mountain like an inverted sea. Lightning flickers without sound, a reminder that power exists even in stillness. Zeus remembers older prophecies, warnings given during the Titan Age, predictions that were not fully understood until too late. He speaks quietly, more to the wind than to the gods. The earth has never forgotten what was buried beneath it. Athena steps closer. Then we prepare. But even preparation carries uncertainty. Because what rises from the earth is not like titans, or sea monsters, or foreign invaders. It is something more intimate, more fundamental. Below, far beneath mortal lands, the giants begin to feel the boundary between their world and the upper world thinning. It is not a physical barrier alone. It is perception, a widening awareness. They begin to sense sky, not as concept, but as presence pressing from above. Some reach upward instinctively. Stone fractures where their hands meet resistance from layers of earth. Others pause as if listening, because something has begun to answer their existence, a distant echo, a divine order watching from above. Gaia's influence flows through them still, but even she does not fully control what they are becoming. This is another uncertainty preserved in ancient tradition. Some poets claim she guided them deliberately. Others suggest the giants developed partial independence once awakened. No single version dominates, and perhaps that ambiguity reflects the deeper truth of myth itself. That creation once released no longer belongs fully to its creator. In Delphi, the oracle remains silent after her prophecy. But those who attend the temple notice something unsettling. The sacred fissure beneath her no longer emits warmth as it once did, as if the earth beneath the temple has grown quiet, listening. Elsewhere, strange signs multiply. A river changes course overnight without visible cause. A statue of Apollo cracks at the base during a windless day. A flock of birds circles a mountain peak for hours without landing. Each sign alone is minor. Together they form pattern. And patterns are what gods and mortals alike fear most. Because patterns imply intention, Zeus returns to Olympus once more. The council gathers again, heavier now, with awareness. Athena speaks carefully. We are not dealing with simple rebellion. Poseidon nods slightly. It feels older than that. Apollo finally speaks, as if something beneath prophecy itself is trying to speak through prophecy. A silence follows. Even gods hesitate when meaning becomes unstable. Zeus looks outward toward the horizon. Clouds gather in the distance now. Not storm yet, only gathering, like breath before speech. He understands that whatever is coming will not arrive as a single moment. It will rise slowly, like mountains forming beneath oceans, like memory becoming matter. And beneath all of it, the earth continues to whisper, not in words, but in pressure, in movement, in waiting. The prophecy has been spoken, and now the world begins to respond. You step into the heart of Olympus once more, where divine order still pretends to be unshaken. Marble halls stretch endlessly upward, their polished surfaces catching torchlight like frozen fire. The air is warm, yet strangely still, as if even breath must obey unseen rules here. But beneath this splendor, something has changed. You can feel it in the silence between footsteps, in the way conversations pause slightly too long, in the way gods glance toward distances they cannot fully see. Olympus has not yet fallen into fear, but it has begun to remember fear. Zeus gathers the council again in the great hall. This time, the gathering feels different, not ceremonial, not celebratory, prepared. Athena stands closest to the center, her presence steady, almost unmoving, as if she has already calculated every possible outcome of what is coming. Hera sits with quiet authority, her gaze never leaving Zeus for long. Poseidon's expression is distant, as though part of his attention is already beneath the sea, listening to shifts in pressure no one else can feel. Apollo remains still, his prophetic senses unsettled by something that refuses to form clearly. And Ares, for once, is not eager, only alert. Zeus speaks. The signs are no longer isolated. His voice carries through the hall like slow thunder. They are converging. A silence follows. Not disagreement. Recognition. You move among them as though walking through thought itself, feeling how each god carries a different interpretation of the same unfolding truth. Athena speaks first. If Gaia is involved, then this will not resemble the Titan War. A subtle shift passes through the hall at her words. The Titan War, even among immortals, that memory carries weight. A time when the world itself was younger and more unstable. Zeus responds carefully. The Titans were imprisoned beneath the world. He pauses. The giants may be rising from within it. The distinction changes everything. Hera leans forward slightly. And if the earth itself is their origin, how do we oppose something we depend upon to stand? No one answers immediately, because the question touches something fundamental. The Greeks believed the earth was not merely terrain. It was foundation. To fight against it is to question stability itself. Outside the hall, clouds drift closer to Olympus. Not yet storm, but intention forming. You sense that Olympus, for all its brilliance, now feels like a structure held together by awareness rather than certainty. A memory returns within the myth. Zeus once overthrew Cronus to establish order. That act was celebrated as the beginning of divine rule. But ancient traditions sometimes hint at a quieter truth, that every order creates something it cannot fully control. And Gaia has not forgotten. You are now guided away from the hall, down through shifting corridors where gods pass in thought rather than speech. In a quieter chamber, Athena and Zeus stand alone. The air here is less ceremonial, more human in its stillness. Athena speaks softly. You feel hesitation. It is not a question. Zeus does not deny it. Hesitation is not weakness, he replies. It is awareness of consequences. Athena studies him for a long moment. Then she says something that carries both respect and warning. The giants will not think as Titans did. A pause. They are not remnants of an older age. They are responses to it. Outside, lightning flickers again across distant sky. No sound follows, only illumination. Far beneath the world, the giants continue their slow ascent toward awareness. They are no longer only forming. They are coordinating, not through language, but through instinct shaped by shared origin. 1. Giant pauses in a cavern that trembles with unseen pressure above. He feels something pressing downward, not physically, but conceptually, a boundary. Another giant reaches upward and touches stone that feels thinner than before. A third listens to vibrations traveling through Earth like distant memory. And within them, something begins to unify. Not command, not hierarchy, but recognition of shared direction. Upward, always upward. Gaia's presence remains within them, but it is changing. Scholars of myth often debate this transformation. Some argue she is guiding them directly. Others suggest she has released them into partial independence, trusting instinct shaped by grief. The truth remains uncertain, as all things born from the earth tend to be. On Olympus, Zeus calls for preparation, not war, not yet, but readiness. He sends messengers through divine paths that stretch beyond mortal geography. Athena begins planning strategies that account for terrain power and unpredictability. Poseidon considers how the sea itself might respond to upheaval in the earth. Apollo seeks clearer interpretation of fragmented prophecies. Hera watches all of it, with the understanding that order is fragile when built upon tension. And Ares waits for something to strike. Yet, even preparation feels uncertain, because no one fully understands what form the conflict will take. You move again to the edge of Olympus, where the sky opens into vastness. Clouds gather more noticeably now, not yet violent, but no longer indifferent. Zeus stands alone for a moment. Wind moves gently around him, though it does not disturb the stillness of his presence. He looks outward, and for a brief moment, you sense something rare in him. Not fear, but recognition of scale. The understanding that even kings of gods operate within forces larger than themselves. Below the earth continues its awakening. Mountains shift slightly in ways that no mortal notices. Rivers adjust their courses. Stone deep beneath fields rearranges itself like thought-forming structure. The world is not breaking. It is reorganizing. And Olympus, for all its glory, is only beginning to understand what that means. A final omen emerges in this section. In a coastal sanctuary dedicated to Poseidon, priests report that the sacred well briefly flows upward instead of downward, water defying expectation, then returning to normal as if nothing occurred. The priests interpret it differently. Some see warning. Others see reflection of imbalance between earth and sea. No consensus exists, only unease. Zeus hears of it without reaction, but something within him tightens slightly, as if even water now carries uncertainty. Olympus remains magnificent, but magnificence alone cannot guarantee stability. And somewhere beneath everything beneath sky, sea, and stone, the earth continues to remember what it has been asked to become. You leave Olympus behind for a moment, drifting downward through the layered world of mortals where the air feels heavier, more immediate, shaped by breath and labor rather than divine will. Here, life continues without awareness of what gathers beneath the earth. Fields stretch across valleys still warm from the sun. Olive trees bend gently in coastal wind. Small stone homes glow faintly with evening firelight as families settle into the rhythm of night. And somewhere within this fragile calm, a man walks beneath the same sky that watches Olympus. Heracles. He is not yet fully the figure that later ages will call a hero of impossible strength and suffering. Here he is still becoming. You walk beside him along a quiet road bordered by cypress trees. His steps are steady, but his presence carries weight, as if every movement echoes something larger than the body that contains it. The Greeks told many versions of his early life. Some say Zeus himself marked his destiny before birth. Others suggest Hera's resentment shaped the trials that would define him. And some traditions, older and more fragmented, hint at something deeper, that Heracles is not only a man among mortals, but a bridge between what is human and what is divine. Tonight, however, he feels only the silence of the world around him, a silence that is beginning to change. As you walk, the wind shifts slightly, not violently, just enough to feel intentional. Heracles pauses near a hillside overlooking distant mountains, and there, beneath a sky filled with early stars, he dreams while awake. A vision unfolds, not fully formed, but persistent. He sees lightning striking earth without storm clouds above. He hears stone cracking beneath impossible pressure, and he feels a presence rising from below the world, vast and unfinished. The dream leaves him unsettled. Ancient storytellers often described such visions as divine warnings. Yet historians continue to debate whether these dreams reflect prophecy or human interpretation of natural anxiety before great upheaval. Either way, Heracles understands something is coming, even if he cannot name it. Far above, Zeus senses him, not directly, but through the faint resonance of fate that connects certain beings across impossible distance. Athena also notices. She appears beside Zeus in another vision-like convergence, her expression already shaped by understanding. He is beginning to see it, she says quietly. Zeus does not ask what she means, because he already knows. Heracles, unlike the gods, is still bound to time, and time makes perception sharper in some ways. You return to Heracles. He continues his journey through mortal lands, passing villages where people speak softly of strange disturbances. A farmer mentions that his well water tasted of iron for a single day. A shepherd describes stones shifting on a hillside without cause. A child speaks of hearing voices in the ground while lying on warm soil. Most dismiss these accounts, yet they accumulate like dust gathering in corners of the world. Heracles listens without interrupting, but you sense that he remembers everything, not because he understands it fully, but because something within him recognizes pattern. He stops at a small shrine dedicated to Zeus. Stone pillars rise into the night sky. Oil lamps flicker softly. A priest offers him bread and wine, but does not speak of prophecy or omen. Instead, there is only reverence. Heracles kneels for a moment, and in that silence, another vision arrives, this one sharper. Closer, he sees a vast hand made of stone, pressing upward through darkness. He sees mountains splitting like cracked pottery. He sees sky pushed aside as if it were fabric. And he hears a sound that is not quite sound, a pressure against existence itself. When the vision fades, Heracles breathes slowly. He does not speak of it, but you know he will remember, because some experiences settle into the soul rather than the mind. Elsewhere, Olympus continues its preparations. Athena studies patterns of terrain where conflict may unfold. Poseidon listens to distant shifts beneath the sea floor. Apollo tries to refine fragmented prophecy into usable understanding. And Zeus watches all of them with growing awareness that knowledge alone may not be enough. Because what rises from the earth does not follow familiar logic of war. It follows origin. And origin cannot be reasoned with. You return briefly to the giants beneath the world. They are moving more clearly now, not yet fully emerged, but no longer still. Their awareness stretches upward through layers of stone and memory. They feel resistance, pressure. The boundary between their world and the one above grows thinner. One giant presses both hands against stone ceiling of a cavern. Cracks spread slowly. Light, faint and unfamiliar, filters downward for the first time. Another giant pauses, sensing something beyond the barrier. Not enemies, not gods yet, but presence. And within that presence, something they instinctively recognize. Opposition. Gaia's influence pulses through them like deep-rooted instinct. But even she does not dictate their exact path. The myth here becomes uncertain again. Some traditions say Gaia intends their rise as correction. Others suggest she is reacting without full foresight. Some even whisper that the giants themselves will shape her intent as much as she shapes theirs. Uncertainty remains essential to their nature. Above ground, Heracles continues walking under a sky now fully dark. Stars shine with steady distance. He feels the world shifting beneath everything he cannot see, and for a moment he looks upward, as if searching for something beyond the visible heavens. A quiet omen passes through him, not spoken, not fully formed, but felt, that he will be called into something larger than himself. Not war alone, but transformation. Back on Olympus, Zeus receives confirmation from multiple sources. Prophetic echoes align more closely now. The pattern is undeniable. The earth is no longer passive. It is becoming active, intentional, and what rises will not wait for divine readiness. Athena speaks again in council. We must assume contact is inevitable. Hera responds more quietly. Then we must also assume loss is inevitable. Silence follows, because even immortals understand what that implies. You stand now at the edge of multiple worlds. Above, gods prepare. Below, giants awaken. Between them, mortals dream of signs they do not fully understand. And Heracles walks through it all without yet knowing his role in what is coming. But destiny in Greek myth rarely waits for awareness. It moves regardless, like tide, like earth, like memory returning to the surface. The night deepens further. Somewhere far away, thunder rolls without rain. And beneath the world, stone continues to learn how to move. You move deeper into the mortal realm again, where the world feels quieter than Olympus, yet far more fragile. Here, everything depends on balance, on weather, on harvest, on water that flows when it should, on stone that stays where it belongs. But that balance is beginning to shift in ways no one can fully explain. Across Greece, the first signs do not arrive as a single catastrophe. They arrive as small distortions in everyday life, almost invisible, almost ignorable. At first, you stand in a rural valley at dawn. Mist drifts between olive groves, soft and pale like breath held too long. Farmers begin their work, as they always have, unaware that the ground beneath them is no longer entirely still. A plow moves across soil, and for a moment, it feels as though the earth resists. Not firmly, but with awareness. The farmer pauses. He looks down. Nothing is visibly wrong. Yet, he feels something he cannot name. A presence beneath the field. Something listening. Ancient storytellers often described such sensations as omens sent by Gaia herself. Modern historians sometimes interpret them as natural seismic activity felt in exaggerated cultural memory. But within the myth itself, there is no clean separation between geology and divinity. They are the same language spoken in different tones. Elsewhere, near a coastal sanctuary dedicated to Demeter priests, prepare grain offerings. The air smells of baked bread and salt wind. Everything is orderly, until the altar stone shifts slightly, not collapsing, not cracking, just moving, as if something beneath it has adjusted its position. The priests fall silent. One of them whispers a prayer meant to calm restless earth. But even as he speaks, he cannot stop glancing downward, as if expecting the ground to speak back. You feel the tension growing across distance like threads tightening across a vast loom. And somewhere above it all, Olympus begins to notice patterns forming more clearly. Zeus receives reports not as isolated incidents, but as a network of disturbances. Athena is already mapping them mentally. Poseidon notes changes in coastal currents and underwater pressure. Apollo's prophecies grow more fragmented, as if clarity itself is being disrupted by something deeper than vision. And Hera observes something else entirely, fear spreading not through panic, but through recognition, the recognition that order is no longer absolute. Back in the mortal world, you walk through a village at midday. Children play near stone wells. Women carry clay vessels filled with water. Men repair broken tools under shaded courtyards. It is ordinary life. And yet beneath it, something is wrong in a way no one can articulate. A dog refuses to cross a certain threshold. A flock of birds circles once, too many times before settling. A well that has never failed suddenly tastes faintly metallic. People begin to speak quietly of these things, not as prophecy, at first, but as coincidence. Yet coincidence has limits. And when too many coincidences gather, they begin to form meaning. Far away, in another region of Greece, a shepherd reports something more disturbing. He says the hillside he has known since childhood feels different beneath his feet. He describes it not as movement, but as presence, as if the mountain is aware of being observed. He tells this to a traveling priest who listens carefully but offers no explanation. Only silence, only a slow nod. Because even priests do not always trust their interpretations. You begin to see how fear spreads in the ancient world, not loudly, but gradually, through uncertainty that cannot be resolved. On Olympus, Zeus stands once more at the edge of a cloud-draped terrace. The world below stretches endlessly, mountains and seas blending into distance. He does not speak for a long time. Athena joins him quietly. "They are not fully here yet," she says. Zeus replies softly, "But they are no longer absent." A pause. Then Athena adds something more precise. The boundary between worlds is weakening. This is not metaphor in their understanding. It is structural reality, a change in the relationship between earth and sky, between formation and form. Below, the giants continue their slow ascent. In vast subterranean chambers, they press against the limits of their confinement. Stone fractures more frequently now. Light seeps through in thin, uncertain lines. The first genuine awareness of the upper world reaches them, not fully formed images, but sensations. Pressure, distance, resistance, and above all opposition. 1. Giant pauses in silence. He does not yet have language, but something within him interprets what he senses, not as threat, but as destination. Another giant responds instinctively, pressing upward harder against stone that now feels thinner than before. Cracks spread like veins of light. Gaia's presence flows through them, but even she feels less like a commander and more like a force guiding momentum already in motion. This is one of the deeper mysteries preserved in myth. Did Gaia create them with purpose? Or did grief itself become creative over time? Ancient poets disagree. Some say she is justice. Others say she is memory. Others still suggest she is neither fully controlled nor fully uncontrollable. You return again to mortals. A temple in a small hillside city begins to report unusual behavior from sacred animals. Goats refuse sacrifice. Birds abandon nesting sites. Priests interpret this as divine withdrawal, a sign that favor is shifting, but toward what no one knows. In the marketplace, rumors begin to circulate, not unified, fragmented. Some speak of anger beneath the earth, others of forgotten gods returning. Others still dismiss everything as imagination born from anxious times. Yet all interpretations share one thing: uncertainty. And uncertainty in myth is never neutral. It always leans toward change. You feel the narrative tightening, like a storm forming without visible clouds. On Olympus, Apollo finally speaks with greater clarity than before. It is not only prophecy that is fragmenting, he says. It is reality itself that is becoming difficult to read. Even Zeus is silent for a moment after this, because it suggests something deeper than conflict. It suggests transformation of the system that governs perception. Hera speaks softly. Then we may not fully understand what rises until it is already upon us. No one disputes her, because it feels increasingly true. And somewhere beneath all of this, beneath gods, mortals, and prophecy, the giants continue to move closer to emergence. Not yet fully formed in the world above, but no longer confined to silence. The earth beneath Greece is beginning to feel less like ground, and more like something thinking. The final omen of this section appears in a coastal shrine during a windless night. Priests observe the sacred flame of Poseidon's altar bending sideways for several seconds without extinguishing, then returning to normal. No explanation is recorded in temple records. Only mention, only silence, only unease that deepens afterward. Zeus receives the report without reaction, but his gaze lingers longer than before on the horizon where sea and sky meet, because even flame now seems uncertain. And beneath everything, the earth continues its slow, deliberate awakening. Not rushing, not hesitating, simply becoming. You descend once more beneath the surface of the world where the air grows heavier and time itself feels slower. Here in the deepest chambers of existence, Gaia does not appear as a figure. She is presence, a vast awareness woven through stone, soil, root, and mountain. And tonight, that awareness is focused. You find yourself within a cavern older than memory. Its walls are not carved by hands, but by pressure and forgotten heat. Veins of mineral light pulse faintly through the darkness like distant heartbeat rhythms. The giants gather here, not yet fully risen, but no longer sleeping. Their forms shift slowly, adjusting to awareness they are still learning to control. Stone limbs flex with uncertain strength. Their breath echoes through hollow corridors like distant earthquakes. And above them, Gaia listens, not with ears, but with the entire structure of the earth. Ancient traditions differ on what follows next. Some say she speaks directly to them. Others say she only influences instinct. Others still claim she is silent, and that all meaning arises from within the giants themselves. You feel this uncertainty as part of the myth's foundation, because even creation does not fully understand its own origin. A pressure gathers in the cavern, not physical force, but intention. Gaia's presence flows through the giants like deep ocean currents beneath still water. And within that flow, something like instruction emerges. Not words, but direction. Upward, always upward. One giant lowers his head slightly as if acknowledging something he cannot comprehend. Another presses his hand against the cavern wall. Stone trembles. Cracks spread like delicate lightning frozen in rock. Through those cracks, the faintest suggestion of light appears. Not sunlight, not firelight. Something between, a hint of the upper world. The giants pause. This moment is significant, because it is the first time they perceive what lies beyond their confinement, not as abstract direction, but as reality pressing inward. Gaia's influence intensifies. Yet, it is not purely commanding. It feels more like memory shared through Earth itself. Memory of what lies above. Memory of what was taken below. Memory of imbalance unresolved. You begin to sense why ancient poets struggled to define her role. Is she mother? Is she justice? Is she force responding to injury? Or is she something older than all of these definitions? Even Olympus does not have a clear answer. Above, Zeus feels the shift before it is visible anywhere else. It arrives as pressure behind thought, a tightening of awareness that spreads across divine perception. He stands once more upon Olympus's highest terrace. Clouds drift beneath him like slow rivers of vapor. Athena is already there when he arrives. She does not turn immediately. You felt it, she says. Zeus answers quietly, yes. A pause stretches between them. Then Athena speaks again. The giants are no longer only forming. Zeus completes the thought. They are organizing. The word carries weight. Organization implies structure. Structure implies intention. And intention implies consequence. Far below, within Gaia's hidden chambers, the giants respond to this growing awareness. Not as soldiers, not as an army, but as beings discovering shared existence. One giant turns slightly toward another. There is no language exchanged, but recognition passes between them. Shared origin, shared pressure, shared direction, upward. The cavern ceiling above them fractures again, larger this time. A faint tremor spreads through distant layers of stone. Somewhere above mortal lands feel nothing yet, but deep instruments of perception within Olympus do. Poseidon senses it through subtle shifts in subterranean water channels. Apollo feels it as distortion in prophetic clarity. Athena interprets it as structural inevitability, and Zeus understands it as arrival of phase change, something ancient Greek storytellers might describe as destiny entering motion. You move briefly back into the mortal world. Night has fallen across villages and cities. Oil lamps flicker behind shuttered windows. Dogs sleep beside doorways. The world appears calm, but sleep is not always absence of change. In a small coastal town, fishermen notice that the sea behaves differently. Waves arrive in patterns slightly too regular. Currents shift without wind. The horizon feels closer than it should. They do not report this as prophecy, only as unease. But unease spreads quickly among those who depend on the natural world for survival. Meanwhile, inland, a farmer wakes in the middle of the night. He swears he heard his fields breathing, slow, rhythmic, as if the earth itself exhaled beneath his home. He tells no one in the morning, but he remembers it. And memory in myth is never passive. It accumulates. On Olympus, council resumes once again. The gods gather, but the atmosphere has changed further. There is less discussion of whether something is happening, more discussion of what to do when it arrives fully. Hera speaks first. If Gaia is guiding them, she says, then this conflict is not rebellion in the usual sense. Poseidon responds carefully. Then it is correction. Ares shifts slightly impatient. Correction implies judgment, he says. But who judges the earth itself? Silence follows. Because the question has no simple answer. Apollo finally speaks, his voice quieter than usual. The prophecies no longer describe outcomes clearly. He pauses. They describe transitions. Zeus listens carefully. Transitions, a word that implies movement without destination, change without clarity. Athena steps forward. We must assume they will emerge in force, she says. And soon, no one disagrees. Because the signs have already moved beyond debate. Below, Gaia's influence deepens. The giants continue to awaken in stages, each movement bringing them closer to the upper world. Stone corridors collapse slowly behind them as they move through ancient, subterranean pathways that no mortal has ever seen. Light increases gradually. Not sunlight yet, but pressure of light. Presence of the world above, pressing downward into their awareness. One giant raises his head fully for the first time. He senses distance, not measured in space, but in resistance. Something above resists him. That resistance becomes meaning, becomes direction, becomes purpose. Gaia's presence flows through him once more, and for a moment there is clarity. Not instruction, but inevitability. The world above must be reached, not as conquest alone, but as resolution. Yet, even this interpretation remains uncertain. Ancient sources disagree. Some say Gaia intended balance. Others say vengeance. Others suggest she simply allowed what had been suppressed to express itself fully. You feel that ambiguity settle over everything like mist. Above ground, Zeus stands alone again. Clouds thicken at the horizon. Lightning flickers more frequently now, though still without thunder. He speaks quietly to himself. Something is coming into form, not prophecy, observation. And beneath everything, the earth continues to respond. Not quickly, not violently, but steadily, like memory becoming movement, like silence becoming voice, like something long buried finally remembering how to rise. You rise with the world into a strange, uncertain morning that does not feel entirely like morning. Light spreads across Greece slowly, as if the sun itself is hesitant to reveal what lies beneath the horizon. Mountains emerge first, pale and distant, then valleys, then villages still wrapped in half-sleep. But something about the dawn feels altered. The air is heavier, the silence between sounds slightly too long. And within that silence, Zeus begins to act. You stand beside him on Olympus as the first light touches the marble terraces. Clouds drift below the mountain like a shifting ocean of white. But Zeus is not watching the beauty of it. He is watching the world beneath it. He has decided something, and that decision carries weight even among gods. Athena arrives first. She senses it immediately. "You are preparing to intervene directly," she says. Zeus does not deny it. Instead, he steps forward to the edge of the terrace. "The earth is revealing too much," he says quietly. Too quickly. A pause. Then Hera appears behind them. Her voice is controlled but sharp beneath its calm. "You intend to obscure the world." Zeus finally turns. Not the world, he answers. Only what it can see of itself. You feel the tension between them like pressure building in a storm that is not yet broken. The gods of Olympus rarely agree on the meaning of concealment, because concealment is power, and power always raises questions of intent. Athena speaks carefully. "If we alter perception of the earth, we may also alter how mortals interpret signs." Zeus nods slightly. That is necessary. A quiet unease passes through the hall, because prophecy depends on visibility, and Zeus is considering removing visibility itself. You follow him now into a higher chamber of Olympus, where divine mechanisms of order are said to influence sky weather and light. Ancient poets described this place differently. Some called it the domain of balance, others the unseen hand of Zeus's authority. Modern scholars continue to debate whether this reflects literal mythic geography or symbolic representation of divine governance. But within the story itself, its power is unquestioned. Zeus raises his hand, and the sky beyond Olympus responds. Not violently, not immediately, but gradually. Clouds begin to gather across the mortal world below. At first they appear natural, a shift in weather patterns, a common occurrence. But then they thicken beyond seasonal expectation. Light dims across valleys that were just moments ago bright with morning sun. Shadows deepen in forests. Harbors lose clarity beneath drifting haze. Mortals do not yet understand what is happening. They only feel that the day is becoming harder to read. You walk through a village as this change unfolds. Farmers pause mid-work. Children look upward without knowing why. Animals grow restless. The sky, once open and predictable, becomes layered and uncertain. Some interpret it as approaching storm, others as divine displeasure. A few feel something deeper, as if vision itself has been softened. Far above, Zeus continues. He does not erase the world. He alters its clarity. The boundary between sign and interpretation becomes less direct. This act carries a subtle omen within the myth, because in ancient Greek, thought-obscured vision is often associated with approaching divine conflict. When gods conceal, destiny becomes less transparent, and uncertainty becomes part of existence itself. Athena watches carefully. "You are reducing clarity," she says. Zeus replies calmly, "I am preventing premature understanding." Hera steps closer. "That is not protection," she says. "That is control." The word hangs in the air longer than intended. But Zeus does not respond immediately, because both interpretations may be true. Below, Gaia feels the shift, not as anger, but as resistance. The world above is becoming less transparent to those who dwell within it. And within the giants, perception begins to change. As they move through subterranean corridors, the faint light from above becomes less distinct, more diffuse, less readable, yet still present. This change does not stop them. It intensifies them, because uncertainty often drives ancient forces toward resolution. One giant pauses. He senses the sky differently now, not as clarity, but as pressure. Another reaches upward, feeling resistance that is no longer purely physical. It is perceptual, conceptual, a boundary becoming harder to interpret. Gaia's influence flows through them again, but even she seems to adapt to the shifting conditions above. Her presence becomes less directional, more expansive. Like an ocean responding to changing tides, you begin to sense a deeper truth emerging in the myth, that control and response are now intertwined on all levels. Olympus acts, the earth responds, and mortals experience only the consequences. You return to Zeus once more. He stands alone now at the highest point of Olympus. Clouds swirl beneath him in slow motion. Lightning flickers faintly within distant formations. But there is still no storm, only preparation. Athena joins him again. "You are not stopping them," she says quietly. Zeus answers without hesitation. "No." A pause. Then he adds, "I am preparing for what cannot be stopped." This acknowledgement changes the atmosphere, because it shifts Olympus from prevention to inevitability. And inevitability is the closest thing gods have to fear. Far below, mortals feel the change more intensely now, not as specific events, but as atmosphere. The sky feels heavier, light feels less precise. Even time seems slightly less stable. In Delphi, priests interpret this as a shift in divine communication. The oracle remains silent longer than usual before entering trance. When she finally speaks, her words are fragmented. Light will no longer show what rises. A pause. Only what remains after it has risen. The message is incomplete, but it spreads quickly, because incomplete prophecy always carries more weight than certainty. You feel the world narrowing into anticipation, not of immediate catastrophe, but of transformation that cannot be delayed much longer. Below, the giants continue their ascent, and Gaia continues her silent guidance, not toward destruction alone, but toward emergence. Above, Zeus's decision has already altered the nature of perception itself, and now nothing in the world will be seen exactly as before. The dawn has been darkened, not into night, but into ambiguity. And ambiguity in myth is the beginning of irreversible change. You move now through a quieter passage of the myth where gods descend not in thunder, but in silence. The world beneath Olympus remains altered by Zeus's decision. Light still exists, but it no longer speaks clearly. Shadows stretch slightly longer than they should. Colors lose some certainty, as if reality itself has been asked to pause before revealing meaning. And in this softened world, Athena descends alone. You walk with her as she leaves the marble heights of Olympus behind, moving through invisible thresholds where divinity brushes against mortality. There is no spectacle, only transition. The air grows heavier with every step downward. The scent of stone and olive groves replaces the brightness of Olympus. Wind begins to carry moisture, salt, and soil. She does not speak, not yet, because Athena does not descend without purpose, and purpose in this moment feels like something still forming. You arrive with her in a quiet region of Greece, where forests press close to human paths. The trees here are older than villages, their roots tangled deep into mythic soil that Gaia herself is said to remember. Somewhere nearby, Heracles walks, not in battle, not in mythic triumph, but in simple movement through mortal land that does not yet know its own importance. Athena watches him before he sees her, a divine awareness observing a mortal life already touched by fate. Ancient traditions differ on why Athena chooses Heracles at this moment. Some say she sees in him the only force capable of standing between Olympus and what rises beneath the earth. Others suggest she sees imbalance that must be shaped, not destroyed. And some interpretations argue she is drawn by something even she cannot fully articulate. You sense the uncertainty around her decision like a quiet tension in the air. Athena steps forward. No thunder announces her arrival. No flame marks the ground. Only presence. Heracles stops immediately, not because he sees her fully at first, but because something within him recognizes what has entered his space. The mortal world has rules about distance between beings, and Athena stands outside all of them. She speaks gently. Do you feel it? Heracles does not ask what she means, because he already knows. He answers carefully. Something beneath the world is changing. A pause follows. Even in myth, such moments are rare. When mortal perception aligns with divine awareness, Athena studies him, not as a warrior, not as a tool, but as a point of connection between two realities that do not often meet in balance. You have seen signs, she says. Heracles nods once. Dreams, he replies. Waking dreams. The wind moves through the trees around them. Olive leaves shift softly, creating a sound like distant rain. Athena turns her gaze toward the horizon. There, unseen by mortal eyes, the structure of the world feels different, more unstable, more responsive. She speaks again. Those dreams are not imagination. A pause. They are contact. You feel the weight of that word. Contact. Not communication in full clarity, but intersection between worlds that are not meant to overlap directly. Heracles lowers his gaze slightly. I saw stone moving, he says quietly, and something reaching upward. Athena does not correct him, because correction would imply certainty, and certainty is no longer fully available. Instead, she steps closer. You will be needed, she says. The words are not prophecy, not command, but recognition. Heracles looks up at her now, and for a moment, the distance between mortal and divine feels thinner than ever before. Above them, Olympus remains distant and altered. Zeus's decision continues to shape perception across the world. And beneath all of it, Gaia's influence continues to grow through unseen layers of stone. Athena continues speaking. What rises beneath the earth is not separate from us. A pause. It is part of the same world we once believed we had mastered. Heracles listens without interruption. But something within him is changing. Not yet transformation, but alignment. A sense that his existence is being positioned within a larger pattern. Ancient storytellers often debated whether Heracles was chosen or discovered, whether fate selects individuals or simply reveals them when conditions converge. There is no definitive answer preserved in surviving tradition, only layered interpretation. You move with Athena deeper into understanding. She is not here to command Heracles into war. She is here to observe resonance, because resonance is what determines survival in times of cosmic imbalance. A sudden shift occurs in the air, not dramatic, but noticeable. A pressure change that moves through forest and soil at once. Heracles feels it first. He turns slightly toward the ground. Athena notices immediately, and for the first time in this descent, she does not speak for several moments. Far beneath them, the giants continue their ascent. The boundary between subterranean existence and surface world is becoming thinner. Stone is no longer purely obstacle. It is membrane, and membranes eventually break. One giant pauses again, this time sensing not just upward direction, but something responding from above. Resistance, awareness, observation. This changes everything, because being observed alters behavior even before contact occurs. Gaia's presence shifts again, still guiding, still present, but now interwoven with anticipation that is no longer entirely hers. Above Olympus registers another subtle change. Apollo's expressions tighten as prophecy becomes more fragmented again. Poseidon notes shifts in deep ocean pressure that do not correspond to seismic patterns. Hera watches Zeus more closely than before, and Zeus remains still for longer periods, as if listening to something beyond visible perception. You return to Athena and Heracles. The forest around them feels quieter now, not peaceful, but expectant. Athena finally speaks again. There is something you must understand. Heracles listens. You are not separate from this world's imbalance. A pause. You are within it. This is not burden placed upon him, but reality acknowledged. Heracles does not respond immediately. Instead, he looks toward the earth beneath his feet, as if trying to sense what Athena already perceives. A final omen enters this section quietly. A nearby stream flows upward for a single moment before returning to its natural course. No one sees it except Athena and Heracles. Neither speaks immediately, Because some signs do not require explanation, only recognition. Athena turns slightly. The earth is becoming aware of itself, she says softly, and so must those who live upon it. Above them, unseen lightning flickers once more across distant sky, still without thunder, still without resolution, and beneath everything deeper than forests, deeper than stone, the giants continue to rise toward a world that is already beginning to feel their presence, not as invasion, but as inevitability. You are no longer in the forests above, nor within the calm reach of mortal perception. Now you descend into motion itself, into the moment when stillness finally breaks. Beneath the surface of Greece, the giants are no longer awakening. They are moving. At first it is subtle, a shift through ancient caverns that were never meant to be traversed. Stone corridors widen under pressure that does not feel physical alone, but inevitable. Layers of earth that have remained unchanged for ages begin to respond, as if remembering they were never meant to be permanent. You walk among them as they begin their ascent, and for the first time, you see their full presence. They are vast, but not uniform. Some are shaped like towering figures of carved basalt, their forms rough and angular, as if the earth could not fully decide what shape to give them. Others are more fluid, almost human in outline, yet distorted by scale and density that defy natural proportion. Their movement is slow but certain, not rushing, not hesitating, just continuing. Ancient poets describe the giants in conflicting ways. Some called them monsters. Others called them divine corrections. Some texts, preserved in fragments, suggest that they were not born as enemies at all, but became so only through interpretation. Modern historians continue to debate whether the Gigantomachy represents a literal mythic war or a symbolic narrative of cosmic order asserting itself against primordial chaos. But within the myth itself, interpretation no longer matters. Only movement does. You hear it first as pressure through stone, then as resonance through deeper layers of earth, then as sound, a low, continuous shifting that spreads outward like the world adjusting its own weight. Above them, the boundary to the upper world grows thinner, not in a single place, but everywhere at once. One giant places a hand against a wall of ancient stone. The contact is not gentle. Cracks spread instantly, not chaotic, but patterned as if the stone understands it is no longer sufficient. Light seeps through the fractures, faint at first, then stronger, not sunlight yet, but suggestion of it, a memory of brightness. Another giant turns toward this light, and something within him reacts. Not emotion as mortals know it, but alignment, a recognition that the world above is not separate. It is continuation, and continuation demands passage. You feel Gaia within this movement, not as voice, not as command, but as pressure guiding direction. Upward remains the only consistent impulse. Yet, even Gaia's intention is layered with ambiguity. Some traditions say she grieves what she unleashes. Others say she is fulfilling balance too long denied. And others still claim she no longer distinguishes between what is created and what is necessary. This uncertainty flows through everything now. Above ground, the world begins to feel unstable in ways mortals cannot fully name. In a valley near Thessaly, shepherds notice that distant mountains appear closer than before, not physically, but perceptually, as if distance itself has softened. In coastal regions, waves behave with slight irregularity, arriving in patterns that feel almost deliberate. Cities experience moments where sound carries differently, as though the air has become inconsistent in density. None of these signs are catastrophic alone, but together they form a pattern that cannot be ignored. On Olympus, Zeus senses the change immediately, not through vision, but through structural awareness of reality itself. He stands within the great hall once more, though this time no council has been called. Athena arrives first. She does not speak immediately, because she feels it too. Poseidon follows his expression darker than before. The sea is responding, he says quietly, not to storms, but to pressure beneath it. Apollo enters last, his gaze distant. The future is becoming harder to read, he admits. That alone is the clearest warning I have received. Zeus listens without interruption, because he already understands what they are circling around. Then he speaks. They are no longer contained. A silence follows. Not shock, recognition, because containment implies separation. And separation no longer exists in the same way. Far below, the giants continue their march upward. Stone corridors collapse behind them as they move through layers of earth that have never been disturbed. Their steps are not hurried, but they are continuous. Each movement reshapes the world slightly, not through destruction alone, but through redefinition. One giant pauses again, this time not because of obstacle, but because of sensation. He feels something above responding, not resistance alone, awareness. As if the world beyond stone has begun to notice him in return. This moment is critical within the myth, because it marks the shift from emergence to confrontation, from hidden movement to mutual recognition. Gaia's influence intensifies briefly, not louder, but denser, as if the earth itself is compressing meaning into action. Yet, even she does not dictate the exact outcome. Ancient sources remain divided here. Some suggest Gaia intended this awakening as correction of imbalance created by Olympian rule. Others claim she acted in response to earlier suffering of titans and primordial beings. Still others argue she simply embodies the natural tendency of Earth to resist stagnation. No single interpretation dominates, and perhaps none are meant to. Above, Zeus turns away from the hall. He steps onto the terrace, where sky and cloud merge into shifting distance. Lightning flickers faintly across the horizon again. Still no thunder, still no storm, only presence. Athena joins him. They will reach the surface, she says. Zeus nods once. Yes. A pause. Then he adds, and when they do, the world will not remain unchanged. This is not prophecy. It is acknowledgement. Below, the giants continue upward. Stone gives way more readily now. Light becomes more persistent, not yet overwhelming, but no longer distant. And with each step, the boundary between earth and sky dissolves further. The world is no longer layered in the same way. It is becoming continuous, and continuity once altered cannot easily be restored. A final omen appears in this section. In a remote mountain sanctuary, the sacred fire dedicated to Hera burns blue for a single moment before returning to its normal flame. Priests interpret it as divine imbalance, others as atmospheric anomaly, but none dismiss it entirely, because even small deviations now feel significant. Zeus does not respond to this report immediately, but his silence deepens. And beneath everything, the giants continue their march toward the surface world, not as invaders, not as guests, but as inevitability taking form. You leave the rising giants behind for a moment, carried sideways through the ancient world, toward the restless boundary where earth meets sea. Here, everything feels unstable in a different way, not through stone or mountain, but through depth, through pressure that has no visible source. You stand now upon the cliffs of a storm-dark coastline. Below you, the Aegean stretches outward like a vast breathing surface shifting between calm and unease. Waves rise and fall with slow rhythm, but something about their motion feels slightly misaligned, as if the sea is listening to something beneath itself. And Poseidon is already here. You feel his presence before you see him, not as a figure alone, but as pressure within the water, within the wind, within the stone of the cliffs themselves. The Greeks believed Poseidon was not only ruler of the sea, but of all trembling ground beneath it. Earthquakes were his language, storms his breath, and today his attention is fixed far below the surface. You walk with him as he stands at the edge of the cliff. No trident raised, no command spoken, only stillness. The ocean below behaves strangely, not violently, not yet, but unevenly. Waves arrive in patterns that seem too structured for chance, then break apart mid-formation, as if disturbed by something moving beneath them. Far offshore, the horizon darkens in a way that is not fully natural, a shadow beneath water, or within it. Ancient traditions differ on what Poseidon perceives in such moments. Some say he feels every disturbance in the earth and sea simultaneously. Others suggest he listens through the bones of the world itself. And some poets claim he hears the memory of all pressure ever released beneath oceans. None of these explanations are definitive, but all point to the same truth. He knows when something large moves below. Today he knows something is wrong. A low vibration passes through the cliff beneath your feet. Not earthquake, not storm. Something subtler, sustained, as if the earth beneath the sea is shifting its shape in slow motion. Poseidon finally speaks. His voice is not loud, but it carries weight like submerged stone. They are moving through the deep boundary. You understand he is not speaking metaphorically. The boundary he refers to is not surface alone, but the thin region where earth and sea meet in unseen layers beneath continents. A place few mortals imagine, and even fewer gods acknowledge openly. You descend with him in perception into that hidden space. And there beneath the seafloor, you feel it. The giants are not only rising upward, they are disturbing everything in between. Subterranean currents shift. Ancient rock formations fracture under slow, immense pressure. Water trapped in deep geological spaces begins to move in directions it has not moved in ages. The sea itself reacts, not with rage, but with uncertainty. Poseidon closes his eyes briefly, and the ocean responds, waves still. Far offshore currents pause for a heartbeat. Even wind hesitates. This is power exercised not through action, but through awareness. Yet even Poseidon does not fully control what he senses, because what rises is not solely within his domain. It belongs to something older, something beneath classification of sky, sea, or earth. You feel a shift again. A deeper resonance now reaches upward from below the seafloor. The giants are approaching regions where earth meets oceanic crust, places where pressure behaves differently, where stone and water have long been in silent negotiation. And now that negotiation is breaking. Far beneath the waves, massive forms move through submerged caverns, carved by time older than memory. A no giant presses against stone that borders underwater chambers. The pressure causes instant rupture. Water floods inward, not violently, but inevitably. Light from above the sea filters downward for the first time into their path. Not sunlight in full clarity, but distortion of it, a shimmering signal of the world above. The giants pause again. This moment is important, because water introduces a new condition into their emergence. Resistance becomes fluid, and fluid resistance is unpredictable. One giant reaches into the water, flooding the cavern. He does not drown. He does not breathe as mortals do. Instead, he senses pressure change, density shift, movement of unseen forces. And within that sensation, something like awareness forms. The sea is not empty. It is layered, living, responsive. Gaia's influence reaches even here. Through earth beneath ocean floor, she continues guiding upward motion. But now Poseidon's domain overlaps. An overlap creates tension. Above on the cliffs, Poseidon opens his eyes again. The ocean has become less stable, not chaotic, but uncertain in structure. He speaks quietly. They are crossing into my realm. But even as he says this, he understands something deeper. It is not a crossing. It is convergence. You return to Olympus briefly. Zeus stands with Athena as reports arrive simultaneously from multiple domains. Sea disturbances, seismic shifts, prophetic fragmentation, atmospheric irregularities, everything converging into one pattern. Athena speaks first. They are no longer beneath us. Poseidon, appearing beside them through divine presence, corrects softly. They are everywhere beneath everything. Silence follows, because that distinction matters. And Zeus finally responds. Then the conflict is no longer vertical. A pause. It is total. Far below, giants continue their movement through submerged passages. Water flows around them differently now, not resisting, but adapting. The boundary between earth and sea no longer holds firm separation. And within that dissolution, something irreversible is forming. A final omen appears in this section. A fishing fleet at sea reports that the ocean briefly turned completely still for several breaths. No wind, no wave, no current, then resumed as if nothing had happened. Sailors describe it not as fear, but as absence, as if the sea had briefly forgotten how to move. Poseidon does not confirm or deny the report, but his silence deepens. And beneath earth and ocean alike, the giants continue their ascent through merging domains. Not yet fully arrived, but no longer confined. And the world begins to understand in fragments that what rises is not contained by any single realm. It belongs to all of them at once. You return to Olympus at a moment when even its light feels less certain. The golden halls are unchanged in form, yet everything within them carries a subtle weight, as if the very air is remembering something it does not want to repeat. Torchlight still burns clean and steady along marble columns. Yet shadows seem slightly longer than they should be. You move with Hera now, not as a distant queen of myth, but as a presence observing imbalance from within the heart of divine order. She does not rush. Hera rarely rushes. Instead, she listens. To silence. To tension beneath speech. To the way even gods pause a fraction longer before speaking. And she understands what that means. Something beneath the structure of Olympus is changing. Not collapsing. Not yet. But shifting in ways that cannot be reversed by authority alone. You walk beside her through corridors lined with offerings from mortals who still believe in divine stability. Golden wreaths, carved prayers, vessels of oil and wine. Each object carries trust. And trust, Hera understands, is fragile when the world begins to move without permission. She stops briefly at a balcony overlooking the cloud sea below Olympus. The horizon is no longer calm. Cloud formations gather in uneven layers, as if the sky itself is unsure how to arrange itself. Far beyond faint lightning flickers without sound. Hera speaks quietly. You feel it too. You understand she is not speaking to you alone. She is speaking to the structure of Olympus itself. To Zeus, to the unseen forces pressing upward from below the world, and to the silence that follows uncertainty. Zeus appears beside her moments later, not in dramatic arrival, but as if he has always been there. His presence feels heavier than before, not in strength, but in awareness. Hera does not turn immediately. You have altered the sky, she says. Zeus answers without hesitation. I have altered visibility. A pause. Then Hera finally turns toward him. And what rises beneath the earth? Zeus meets her gaze. We prepare for it. Her expression tightens slightly. Not anger, not submission. Something more complex. Recognition without acceptance. You sense that Hera is not simply reacting to Zeus. She is evaluating the logic of divine order itself. Because in Greek myth, Hera is not only queen, she is continuity, structure, marriage between power and consequence. And when structure weakens, she notices before others do. Far below Olympus, the giants continue their movement. But something has changed in their progression. The world above is no longer distant abstraction. It is influence, pressure, resistance shaping their perception. One giant pauses within a vast subterranean chamber now partially flooded by seawater. Stone walls around him tremble as ocean pressure intersects with earthbound instability. He senses two forces at once, upward pull from Gaia and lateral resistance from shifting domains. This duality creates something new within him, confusion, but also adaptation. Another giant reacts instinctively, striking a weakened wall. Stone fractures more easily than before. Light pours through cracks in irregular pulses. The world above is becoming less hidden and more present. Back in Olympus, Hera walks away from Zeus, not in rejection, but in thought. You follow her into quieter sections of the palace where divine activity is less formal. Here she stops near a column carved with ancient symbols of union and oath. She places a hand against it, and for a moment she does not speak. Ancient interpretations of Hera differ. Some portray her as jealous, others as vengeful, but older traditions preserved in fragmented hymns suggest something more subtle. She is the one who preserves agreements even when they become uncomfortable, and now she feels the agreement of cosmic balance beginning to fail. A subtle omen arrives. A sacred peacock associated with Hera behaves strangely within the palace gardens. Its feathers reflect light incorrectly for a moment, as if the boundary between reality and perception has shifted. Priests interpret it as divine attention turning inward, others as instability in celestial order. No interpretation feels fully satisfying. Hera continues walking, and you sense her thoughts forming slowly, not rebellion against Zeus, but something closer to correction, because she understands that power without balance becomes distortion. You return briefly to Zeus, who stands once more at the edge of Olympus. Athena joins him silently. Poseidon's presence is felt but distant, as if divided across domains. Zeus speaks quietly. Hera is watching differently now. Athena replies. She always does. A pause. Then Zeus adds, but now she questions the foundation itself. Below, Gaia continues her influence through earth and sea. The giants continue their ascent, and Olympus, for all its height, begins to feel less like a throne above the world, and more like a structure resting upon something that is waking beneath it. In Hera's quiet chambers, she studies ancient patterns of divine order, marriage between gods and mortal consequence, oaths that bind fate itself. She begins to see something forming that even Zeus's preparation cannot fully account for. Not rebellion, not invasion, but imbalance emerging from origins that no longer obey separation. Another omen follows. Within a sacred hall, the flame dedicated to Hera flickers briefly without wind or cause. It does not extinguish, but it bends, as if acknowledging something unseen passing through the world. Hera watches it without reaction, but something within her resolves, not against Zeus, not against Olympus, but toward restoration of balance, whatever form that may take. Far beneath all domains, the giants continue their movement upward through collapsing boundaries of earth, sea, and stone. And the world, still unaware of its full transformation, begins to shift into a state where no realm remains isolated from another. Everything is becoming connected. Everything is becoming shared, and nothing, not even Olympus, remains untouched. You descend once more into the shifting boundary between worlds where stone no longer feels fixed, and the air itself seems to remember pressure from beneath. Here, the giants are no longer only moving toward the surface. They are shaping the path as they rise, and you begin to feel the first true sense of confrontation forming in the myth. Not yet full war, but contact between inevitability and resistance. Athena moves ahead of you now, not as observer, but as strategist entering terrain already changing under her awareness. The world around her feels different from earlier sections of Olympus. More unstable, more responsive, as if even stone is beginning to anticipate her presence. She does not descend with thunder. She descends with clarity, and clarity in times like this feels almost like force. You arrive with her in a fractured region of the world, where earth and sky feel unnaturally close. Mountains here are broken into uneven ridges. Valleys carry deep silence that seems to absorb sound rather than carry it. Ancient traditions sometimes place the Gigantomachy in such regions, though exact geography varies across surviving myths. Some say Phlegra, others suggest regions later identified with volcanic lands of Italy. Historians continue to debate whether these locations reflect real memory of seismic activity or symbolic mapping of cosmic struggle. But here, within the story itself, place feels secondary. Presence is what matters, and Athena feels it immediately. The giant Enceladus is near. You sense him before you see him, not through sight, but through pressure in the ground that feels uneven, as if the earth itself is struggling to maintain shape. Then the ground breaks upward, stone shifts, dust rises in slow waves, and Enceladus emerges. He is immense but not chaotic. His form carries structure shaped by both earth and resistance. His movement is deliberate, as if each step tests the stability of reality around him. Ancient poets describe him differently depending on region. Some depict him as monstrous, others as tragic. A few preserved hymns suggest he was once closer to harmony with Gaia's intent before becoming defined by opposition. You feel that ambiguity now as he rises. Enceladus does not immediately attack. He observes. And in that observation, something ancient and unsettling occurs. Recognition, not of Athena as enemy alone, but of order itself. Athena stands still. The wind around her shifts slightly, though it does not disturb her posture. She speaks once. Enceladus. His name echoes strangely in the fractured landscape. Not fully sound, not fully meaning. The giant responds not with language, but with movement. Stone beneath him fractures again. And the first true clash of this phase begins. Athena does not rush forward. She calculates. Every movement she makes carries intention shaped by understanding rather than impulse. You move with her through space that no longer behaves predictably. The earth reacts to proximity. Stone adjusts subtly beneath shifting pressure. Enceladus advances, not quickly, but inevitably. And with each step, the world becomes less stable. Athena raises her hand, not in fear, but in precision. Light gathers faintly around her presence. Not the overwhelming brilliance of Olympus, but focused clarity, a sharpening of perception itself. Enceladus strikes. The impact is not merely physical, it is geological. The ground fractures outward in radiating lines, Entire sections of terrain collapse into deeper layers of earth. Dust rises like slow-moving storms, and for a moment, silence follows. Not absence, but suspended consequence. Athena remains standing. And within that stillness, you feel something important. This is not yet victory or defeat. It is measurement, understanding of scale between divine intelligence and primordial force. Ancient interpretations of this encounter differ. Some say Athena alone restrains Enceladus beneath Mount Etna in later mythic geography. Others claim multiple gods were involved in binding him beneath volcanic regions. Some scholars suggest these variations reflect attempts to explain natural eruptions through mythic narrative. But within the story itself, the meaning is simpler. Resistance has met awareness, and neither is fully prepared to end the other. Athena moves now, not aggressively, but decisively. Her presence shifts the structure of perception around Enceladus. The giant hesitates for the first time, not from fear, but from recalibration. Something within him responds to intelligence that does not match brute force. Gaia's influence pulses through him again. But even that influence seems to encounter complexity now, because Athena represents order that adapts rather than simply resists. You feel the tension rise, not in explosion, but in unfolding contradiction. Enceladus pushes forward again. Stone rises beneath him. The world fractures in layered responses, and Athena counters not with destruction, but with containment of meaning itself. Light tightens around structure. Perception narrows. Space becomes defined in sharper boundaries. The giant's movement slows, not stopped, but resisted at conceptual level. Above Olympus registers this encounter as distant tremor. Zeus feels it immediately. Athena is engaged. Poseidon senses disturbance through subterranean resonance. Apollo receives fragmented vision that collapses before full interpretation. Hera watches without speaking. Each god understands that contact has begun, not across distance, but within shared reality. Far beneath them, Enceladus continues to push against Athena's presence. But now, something changes. The environment itself begins to respond differently, not purely through destruction, but through adaptation to divine order. And that adaptation is new, unstable, unfinished. A final omen arrives in this section. Nearby volcanic ground begins to emit faint light through cracks without eruption. Priests in distant temples interpret this as sign of buried forces stirring beneath earth. Some believe it to be punishment, others transformation. None can agree. Athena stands before Enceladus in silence once more. The giant does not retreat, but he also does not advance further. For now, both forces exist in suspended opposition, and beneath them, the earth continues to shift, not toward collapse, but toward redefinition. You leave the fractured ground where Athena stands in silent tension with Enceladus, and you rise once more into the mortal world where destiny is still learning the shape it will take. The air here feels lighter, but not calmer. Something is coming closer now. And even mortals, who do not understand prophecy, begin to feel it in their bodies before their minds can name it. You find Heracles again. He is no longer simply walking. He is listening. To the earth, to the wind, to something deeper that has no language. He stands at the edge of a quiet valley where olive trees bend gently in evening wind. The sky above is pale, fading from gold into the deep blue of approaching night. And yet beneath this beauty, there is pressure, a sense that the world is holding itself in place. Waiting, Heracles reaches for his bow, not in fear, not in urgency, but in recognition. You feel the moment stretch as if time itself is pausing to observe what choice will be made. Ancient traditions disagree on when Heracles first becomes directly involved in the Gigantomachy. Some say he is summoned by Zeus as a mortal ally chosen by prophecy. Others suggest Athena guides him subtly toward his role long before he understands it. And a few older fragments imply he was always part of the conflict even before it reached awareness. You feel all versions existing at once, overlapping like currents in the same sea. Heracles lifts his gaze toward the horizon, and for a moment he sees it. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. A distant distortion in the world's fabric, as if mountains are shifting their positions slightly against expectation, as if the earth itself is exhaling. A dream returns to him now. Stronger than before, he sees a hand of stone rising from beneath land. He hears the sound of deep fractures forming across unseen caverns, and he feels a presence above and below him at once, pulling, pressing, converging. When the vision fades, he does not lower his bow. Instead, he tightens his grip. And in that gesture, something essential changes. He is no longer only a mortal touched by divine attention. He is becoming alignment. You sense Athena watching him from distance, though she is not physically present. Her influence reaches him like structured thought across impossible space. A subtle instruction forms within his awareness, not spoken, but understood. Aim not at what is seen, but at what rises unseen. Heracles breathes slowly. The wind moves through the valley, carrying the scent of dry grass and olive leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls once and then falls silent. And then he draws the bowstring, not fully released. Not yet. Just tension, potential held in balance. Above and below, the world feels momentarily suspended. Even Olympus senses it. Zeus turns toward the mortal realm. Athena pauses in her distant confrontation with Enceladus. Poseidon stills the currents beneath his awareness, because something essential is forming. Not battle yet, but convergence. You return briefly to the giants. Their movement has reached a stage where resistance and emergence coexist. Stone above them is thinner now. Light filters through more frequently. Not sunlight in full, but fractured illumination. They feel it. Each giant responds differently. Some press forward with increasing force. Others pause, sensing that the boundary they are approaching is not only physical, it is symbolic. Enceladus, still engaged with Athena's presence elsewhere, feels the resonance of something beyond his immediate struggle, a wider pressure forming across existence. Gaia's influence pulses again through all giants simultaneously. Not command, but acceleration. The world above is close, and it is responding. Back with Heracles, the bow remains drawn. His breath is steady. His focus sharpens beyond mortal perception. And then the moment arrives. Not with sound, but with certainty. He releases. The arrow cuts through evening air with quiet precision, disappearing into distance beyond visible land. You are not told immediately what it strikes, only that it travels towards something that is not fully present in the mortal plane. Elsewhere, beneath fractured layers of earth, a giant reacts. Not to pain, but to interruption. A force arrives from above ground that does not behave like physical weaponry alone. It carries intention, direction, clarity, and where it strikes, resistance falters for the first time. The giant staggers. Stone fractures across his form in branching lines of instability. Not destruction, but disruption of cohesion. Athena senses it immediately. Heracles has entered the pattern, not as observer, but as active force within divine earth conflict. Zeus feels it as confirmation. The mortal element has become necessary, and necessity changes the nature of war. Ancient poets later describe this moment differently. Some say Heracles wounds the giants with divine arrows blessed by Zeus. Others say Athena guides each shot directly to its target. Some interpretations suggest he symbolizes human participation in cosmic order itself. None are fully consistent, but all agree on one truth. The giants are no longer untouched by mortal action. You feel the structure of the myth tightening, threads converging. Olympus, earth, sea, and mortal realm now interwoven. Heracles lowers his bow slightly. He does not celebrate. He does not speak, because he understands something without needing explanation. This is not victory. It is entry into something far larger than himself. A final omen closes this section. Far away in a sacred grove, a tree without wind sheds its leaves all at once, as if responding to unseen impact. Priests interpret it as divine signal of conflict, beginning in earnest. Some fall silent in prayer. Others record it as warning, but none mistake it for coincidence. Above all realms, Zeus watches the convergence of forces now fully underway. Athena remains engaged. Poseidon remains alert. Hera remains watchful. And beneath everything, the giants continue their ascent toward a world that is no longer passive. It is responding. And response once begun cannot easily be undone. You drift away from the sharpened tension of Heracles and the giants, and the world softens for a moment in an unexpected way. not into peace, but into something more unstable. Emotion itself begins to feel like a force moving through the myth. You arrive where the battlefield has not yet fully formed, but its influence is already spreading through the edges of existence. And here Dionysus appears, not as the god of celebration you might expect from mortal festivals, but as something older beneath joy, something that dissolves boundaries. You walk beside him through a landscape where vineyards grow in twisted light and distant hills seem to pulse with faint rhythm that is not music, but memory. His presence is quiet at first, almost gentle. Yet there is an undercurrent of unpredictability within him that even other gods treat carefully. Ancient traditions differ sharply on Dionysus's role in the Gigantomachy. Some sources describe him as a healer of madness, others as one who spreads divine frenzy among enemies. A few fragmentary hymns suggest he is both at once depending on balance of forces in a given moment. You feel that contradiction now as he moves. Dionysus pauses, and the air around him shifts, not violently, but perceptibly, as if perception itself is becoming less rigid. Far beyond this space, the giants continue their ascent, and something within Dionysus responds to their presence. Not fear, not hostility, but resonance. He speaks softly. Even the earth remembers how to lose itself. The words feel like they belong to no single listener. They drift outward into myth itself. You sense that Dionysus is not preparing for battle in the way Ares would. He is preparing transformation, a different kind of force entirely, one that does not break structure, but dissolves it. You move with him now toward regions where divine and mortal influence overlap. In these spaces, ancient rituals begin to echo without being performed. Drums sound faintly where no one plays them. Shadows move in rhythms that suggest unseen gathering. Ancient Greeks associated Dionysus with altered states of consciousness where boundaries between self and world become uncertain. And in this moment, that symbolism feels almost literal. Dionysus raises his hand slightly, and something subtle spreads outward, not visible, but felt. A loosening of structure in perception, where resistance becomes less defined, where fear becomes less fixed, where identity itself becomes more fluid. And somewhere far away, the giants feel this shift. Their ascent continues, but their awareness of the world above begins to change in texture. Less opposition, more ambiguity. Less clear separation, more connection. This introduces a new layer of uncertainty into the myth. Because not all divine forces act through opposition. Some act through transformation, and transformation can be more destabilizing than force. You return briefly to Olympus. Zeus senses the change immediately. "This is not battlefield preparation," he says quietly. Athena responds without hesitation. It is influence on perception. Poseidon remains silent for a long moment, then speaks. That is more dangerous than force. Hera watches both of them carefully, because she understands what they are circling around. The war is no longer purely structural. It is becoming psychological, ontological. Even reality's boundaries are beginning to soften. Back with Dionysus, you walk through a space where light and shadow no longer behave in predictable opposition. Colors feel deeper but less stable. The wind carries faint echoes of voices that may not belong to any present moment. Dionysus stops again, and this time he looks upward. Not toward Olympus, but toward the unseen pressure forming across the world. "You are becoming many things at once," he says softly. It is unclear whether he speaks to the giants, or to the world itself, or to the idea of change. A distant sound begins to form, not yet battle, but anticipation spreading through multiple layers of existence. And Dionysus smiles faintly, not with joy, but recognition, because transformation always begins this way. Not with clarity, but with loosening. Elsewhere, Heracles feels this shift as he stands alone again in mortal land. The tension in his bow has been released, but its effect continues to ripple through unseen distance. He does not yet know the full result, but he senses that something in the world has responded differently to his action. Not resistance, but adaptation. Athena watches from afar, and even she acknowledges the change. "The pattern is no longer rigid," she says softly to herself. Below the surface of the world, giants continue their ascent, but their perception of resistance is changing. Some begin to hesitate, not in fear, but in uncertainty about the nature of what they are approaching. Gaia's influence remains constant, but now it interacts with Dionysian instability spreading through perception itself. Meaning becomes less fixed, boundaries less defined, and ascent becomes not only physical movement, but conceptual transition. You feel the myth approaching a more dangerous phase. Because when perception changes, conflict changes, and when conflict changes, outcome becomes less predictable. A final omen appears in this section. In a remote valley, villagers report hearing music without source during complete silence of night. No instruments are found, no performers seen. But those who hear it describe it as both comforting and unsettling at once. Dionysus does not acknowledge the report, but his presence lingers longer in the mythic structure, as if transformation itself is beginning to accompany the rise of the giants. And beneath everything, the world continues to shift, not toward resolution, but toward becoming something it has not yet fully named. You leave behind the dissolving edges of Dionysus's influence, where perception itself had begun to loosen like fabric under strain. Now the world sharpens again, not into certainty, but into contrast. Light and darkness regain definition. Distance becomes measurable once more. And within this restored clarity, you feel two presences emerge across the widening myth: Artemis and Apollo, the twin lights. You move first into the silence of the wilderness, where Artemis reigns. Forests stretch endlessly beneath pale moonlight, untouched by cities or mortal noise. The air is cool, carrying the scent of pine and wild earth. Somewhere in the distance, water moves through hidden streams, like soft breath beneath stone. Artemis stands alone among trees older than memory, not isolated, but aligned with solitude itself. She listens, not to sound, but to imbalance and silence. Ancient traditions describe Artemis as goddess of the wild of boundaries between civilization and untamed existence. And here, in this moment, those boundaries feel strained. She senses it before it arrives. A disturbance not of creatures or hunters, but of structure, of earth responding beneath unseen pressure. You feel her awareness extend outward like a calm radius through the forest. Then she speaks softly. They are approaching the surface. No one answers her. Because she is not speaking to anyone present, she is acknowledging what the world itself has begun to reveal. Above the forest canopy, moonlight shifts slightly, not dimming, but altering in tone, as if even celestial reflection is adjusting to what rises below. You move now to Apollo, and the world brightens, not in warmth, but in clarity. Temples dedicated to him stand along ridges where sunlight gathers with precision. The air is thin here, carrying echoes of prophecy and interpretation. Apollo sits within a sanctuary where light falls in controlled patterns through carved stone openings. He is listening, but not to mortals, to prophecy itself. And prophecy tonight is fragmented. You feel it as he does, not as broken messages, but as incomplete structure, as if the future itself has begun to lose its fixed grammar. Apollo speaks quietly. The vision resists coherence. A pause. Something is altering the way outcomes form. Ancient scholars often debated Apollo's role in the Gigantomachy. Some describe him as distant observer, others as active defender of divine order. A few texts suggest he influences perception of events rather than events themselves. You sense that interpretation becoming relevant now, because perception is shifting everywhere. Far below, giants continue their ascent. But now, they encounter a world shaped not only by resistance or transformation, but by clarity and distortion alternating in unstable rhythm. Apollo feels this through prophecy. Artemis feels it through silence. And together, they represent two forms of awareness responding to the same imbalance. You return to Artemis first. She moves through the forest now, not hurried, but attentive. Every step is measured against changes in air pressure, sound, and unseen motion beneath ground. Animals around her behave differently. Deer pause too long. Birds hesitate mid-flight. Even wind seems uncertain how to move between branches. She stops at a clearing. Moonlight falls directly upon her, and for a moment, she looks upward. Not in worship, but in assessment. Below her, beneath layers of earth and stone, the giants continue their approach toward the surface, and something about their presence now feels closer, not physically, but perceptually. Artemis raises her hand slightly, and in response, the forest stills further, not frozen, but attentive, as if nature itself is listening for instruction. Meanwhile, Apollo's sanctuary experiences a different shift. Light patterns within his temple begin to distort subtly, not breaking, but refracting in new ways. Prophetic symbols carved into stone appear to shift meaning depending on angle of observation. Priests report visions becoming inconsistent even within single trance states. Apollo does not correct this, because correction would require stability that no longer exists. He speaks again. The future is not absent. A pause. It is multiplying. This realization carries weight even among gods, because multiplicity of outcome means diminished certainty of divine foresight. You return briefly to Olympus. Zeus senses both presences simultaneously. Artemis's stillness. Apollo's fragmentation. Athena interprets it immediately. Perception is splitting across domains, she says. Poseidon adds quietly. Even the sea reflects uncertainty now. Hera observes without interruption, because she recognizes the deeper implication. When perception fragments, authority becomes less absolute. Below, the giants continue moving upward, but their ascent is now experienced differently across divine senses. Artemis perceives them as imbalance in natural order. Apollo perceives them as instability in potential futures. And Gaia continues guiding them through Earth that is itself adapting to multiple interpretations of reality. One giant pauses, not because of resistance, but because he senses something above that is no longer singular. Multiple forms of awareness are now perceiving him simultaneously, and that awareness changes him. He does not fully understand it, but he responds, slowly, carefully, as if adjusting to a world that is no longer defined by single interpretation. You feel the myth reaching another threshold, because now even observation is no longer neutral. It is participatory. Artemis closes her eyes briefly in the forest, and when she opens them, the wilderness feels more alert than before. Apollo lowers his gaze in his temple, and the symbols around him continue to shift meaning subtly with each passing moment. A final omen appears in this section. At the boundary between forest and cultivated land, wild animals and domestic animals briefly gather in silence without conflict, standing together, as if reacting to something neither fully understands. Then they disperse. No explanation is offered. Only recognition that the natural order itself is responding to unseen change. And beneath all of it, the giants continue their ascent, no longer perceived in a single way, but through multiple layers of divine awareness that no longer fully agree. And that disagreement itself becomes part of the rising tension shaping the world. You leave the divided lights of Artemis and Apollo behind, and the world darkens again into something heavier, older, more physically charged. The air feels compressed, as if the sky itself is leaning closer to the earth. And beneath that pressure, the war finally begins to show its true scale. You arrive at a place where the boundary between earth and sky has already begun to fail. Mountains here do not feel like distant landmarks. They feel like structures under strain. Stone ridges tremble with slow instability, and deep valleys echo with distant fractures that seem to travel through the ground rather than across it. This is where one of the giants rises in full confrontation with Olympus, not yet named clearly in all traditions, but remembered in myth as the one who tried to challenge the heavens with the earth itself. You feel him before you see him, not as figure alone, but as mass becoming intention. He stands among shattered slopes, his form immense enough that even distant peaks appear small beside him. His presence carries the weight of accumulated stone, pressure, and time. And now that weight is being directed upward. Ancient traditions differ on this moment. Some say he is Enceladus. Others attribute this act to different giants, depending on regional storytelling. Some poets merge multiple figures into a single symbolic force, representing resistance against divine order. Historians continue to debate whether this reflects memory of volcanic activity or purely allegorical narrative. But within the myth itself, identity becomes secondary. Action is what defines meaning. The giant bends slowly, not in weakness, but in gathering, and then he lifts. The mountain rises with him, not as metaphor, but as physical reality shaped by impossible strength. Stone tears free from the earth in vast sections. roots of mountains exposed like broken bones of the world. Dust rises in enormous waves, swallowing valleys in slow motion, and for a moment the earth itself seems to hesitate, as if unsure whether it should allow such movement. Then the giant throws. The mountain moves through air that should not be able to contain it. Its mass distorts wind currents, fractures clouds, and casts a shadow that sweeps across distant lands in moments. You stand beneath this impossible arc of motion, and the sky itself feels threatened. On Olympus, Zeus senses the event instantly, not as distant report, but as direct rupture in cosmic stability. Athena arrives beside him, already aware. Poseidon feels seismic resonance ripple through ocean and seabed simultaneously. Hera watches without speaking. Apollo's prophetic vision breaks into fragments too incomplete to interpret fully. And Ares, for the first time, does not speak at all, because the scale of what has occurred exceeds simple categories of war. Zeus finally speaks. The world is being used as weapon. His voice carries no surprise, only recognition. The throne mountain continues its impossible path upward, not toward random destruction, but toward the boundary of heaven itself. Cloud layers distort as it approaches unseen thresholds between mortal sky and divine realm. Wind fractures around it. Lightning gathers without sound. Reality itself seems to adjust to accommodate its passage. And then something responds, not resistance from Olympus alone, but structural reaction from the order of existence. The mountain slows, not stopped, but altered in motion, as if the sky itself refuses full entry of Earth into its domain. Athena watches carefully. This is not only force, she says quietly. It is negotiation of boundaries. Below the giant who threw it remains in place, his posture still extended from effort. Stone fractures along his arms and shoulders from the magnitude of action he has taken. But he does not fall, he observes, as if waiting for outcome, as if expecting return. Gaia's influence pulses through him again, not guiding specific motion now, but reinforcing existence. Because in this moment, the giants are no longer only rising. They are asserting relationship with the structure above them. You feel the myth widening, not just war between beings, but tension between domains of reality itself. Sky, earth, sea, each no longer fully independent. On Olympus, Zeus raises his gaze toward the approaching mountain. The sky darkens slightly around it, not through storm, but through density of presence. He speaks quietly. They are no longer beneath us, Athena responds, and no longer contained. A pause follows. Then Hera adds something unexpected. Then we are no longer separate from them. This shifts everything, because it removes distance as defining principle. The mountain continues its slow descent toward the boundary of heaven, not fully reaching it, but pressing against it, testing it, and the boundary responds, not by breaking, but by revealing its resistance. A final omen appears in this section. Across distant lands, multiple observers report a single moment where the horizon seemed to tilt upward before returning to normal alignment. No physical damage recorded. No storm follows. But perception itself is briefly altered, and those who witnessed it describe an overwhelming sense that the sky had been touched by something not meant to reach it. Zeus remains still for a long moment, watching the point where Earth meets divine boundary under pressure, and for the first time since the war began forming Olympus, does not feel above the world. It feels within range of it. You move away from the suspended impact of the mountain thrown at heaven, and the world softens again into something quieter, but not calmer, because silence now carries memory, and memory is becoming active. You descend into regions where the earth itself feels saturated with what has already happened, as if every step is walking across accumulated history. The giants are still rising, but now something new has begun to accompany their movement. Echo, not sound alone, but consequence returning to its origin. You find yourself in a vast, fractured landscape where earlier battles of emergence have left deep marks across stone and soil. Cracks radiate through valleys like forgotten lightning. Entire slopes appear reshaped by pressure that no longer feels singular. Here, the earth is not passive. It is responding and remembering. Ancient traditions speak of Gaia, not only as creator of giants, but as witness to all violence within the world she embodies. Some hymns suggest she cannot forget what passes through her body. Others describe her as absorbing all loss, carrying it forward as transformation rather than disappearance. You feel that idea now, because every movement of the giants seems to awaken older disturbances beneath the surface. Not just geological instability, but layered memory embedded in stone. Far above Olympus remains unaware of the full depth of this phenomenon. But Athena feels it first. Standing again near the boundary between divine awareness and mortal perception, she notices something unusual. The world is not only changing forward, it is changing backward. Effects ripple into causes. Causes echo into origins. Zeus joins her silently. He senses it too. This is not simple emergence, Athena says. Zeus replies slowly. It is recursion, a word that feels foreign to mythic language, yet perfectly describes what is unfolding. Because what rises is not only new, it is entangled with what already was. Below them, the giants continue their ascent through terrain that now responds differently to their presence. Stone fractures more easily in some places, but resists in others, as if the world itself is uncertain how to treat them. You follow this instability deeper, and there within layers of fractured earth, you begin to see something disturbing. Remnants of earlier impacts, not from this war alone, but from previous cycles of conflict preserved in mythic memory. Broken mountain fragments, compressed layers of earth that suggest repeated upheaval across unknown ages. Even time feels layered here, as if Gaia does not forget previous transformations, but stores them within structure itself. The giants move through this accumulated history, and with each step they awaken it, not intentionally, but inevitably. 1. Giant pauses in a chamber where stone seems darker than surrounding earth, not from shadow, but from density of memory. When he steps forward, the ground reacts differently. Fragments of ancient pressure release in subtle shifts, not destructive, but revealing, as if the earth is exhaling what it has held for too long. Above ground, mortals begin to notice new disturbances, not dramatic, but persistent. In certain valleys, stones appear warmer than surrounding terrain. In others, cold persists even under sunlight. Some rivers carry unusual sediment patterns that change direction without clear cause. Villagers begin to speak more frequently of memory in the earth, of places that feel older than they should. And yet, no one can define what that means precisely. On Olympus, Hera observes Zeus more closely than before, because she recognizes something forming beyond immediate conflict. Not rebellion, not invasion, but accumulation. Zeus speaks quietly. The earth is not only reacting, he pauses, it is recalling. Poseidon, sensing this through deep ocean resonance, adds, then what rises is not only movement, it is history. Apollo's visions fragment again, not into images, but into layers that overlap without sequence, future and past blending into indistinction. Athena remains focused. If history is becoming active, she says, then prediction becomes unreliable. Silence follows, because she is correct. Below, the giants continue to rise, but their movement now triggers deeper responses from the earth itself. Layers of pressure shift not only upward, but outward through time-embedded structures. Gaia's influence pulses through all of it, but now it feels less like guidance and more like awareness expanding through memory. You begin to understand the deeper transformation. This is no longer purely ascent. It is integration of past and present into a single unstable continuum. And within that continuum, meaning itself begins to shift. A final omen appears in this section. In a remote mountainous region, travelers report hearing faint sounds beneath the ground that resemble voices repeating words from no known language. The sounds last only briefly, but those who hear them describe overwhelming sensation of recognition without understanding. No interpretation fully explains it, and no explanation resolves the unease it leaves behind. Zeus stands for a long moment at Olympus's edge, looking outward, not only at what is coming, but at what has always been beneath what is coming. And for the first time, the boundary between past and present no longer feels stable even to the gods. It feels revising itself. You rise again toward Olympus, where the air feels sharper now, as if even divinity itself is under pressure. The sky is no longer a distant dome of calm order. It is a threshold being tested from below. And within that tension, One name begins to dominate the gathering storm of myth. Porphyrion. Among all the giants, his presence is described with unusual consistency across surviving traditions, not merely as strength, but as challenge directed toward the highest point of order itself. You stand beside Zeus as he becomes aware of this force, approaching its inevitable confrontation. The warning arrives not as prophecy this time, but as impact felt across domains simultaneously. The earth shifts, the sea responds. Even the air above Olympus tightens slightly, as if acknowledging pressure it cannot ignore. Athena is already present when Zeus turns toward the horizon. Poseidon's awareness ripples through distant waters. Hera watches from within the palace, sensing structural imbalance rather than physical threat. Apollo's visions fracture again, but this time with violent instability. And Ares finally speaks with certainty. This is the one who comes for the center. Zeus does not respond immediately, because he already feels it, not as fear, but as alignment of inevitability. You move with him into the open expanse of Olympus's highest terrace. Clouds gather unevenly below. Lightning flickers in slow, deliberate intervals. Not storm yet, but recognition. Then the horizon breaks, not visually at first, but structurally. The world feels as if it is adjusting to something approaching from below and beyond, simultaneously. Porphyrion rises into perception, not fully emerged yet into Olympus's space, but already exerting presence across boundary layers. He is not simply ascending, he is pressing, and where he presses reality resists invisible strain. Zeus steps forward. The air around him tightens with divine authority. Ancient traditions differ on what follows next. Some describe Zeus confronting Porphyrion directly with thunderbolts that split sky and earth. Others suggest a more complex struggle involving multiple gods coordinating resistance. A few older accounts imply the confrontation is as much conceptual as physical, occurring across overlapping realms of existence. But all versions agree on one point. This is not a distant battle. This is contact at the boundary of Olympus itself. Porphyrion arrives into partial visibility, not fully above ground, not fully below, a being suspended at the threshold between emergence and confrontation. His presence distorts perception around him. Distance feels unstable. Scale becomes difficult to measure. Even time appears to hesitate slightly. Zeus raises his hand. Thunder gathers, not as storm formation, but as concentrated will. Porphyrion responds. Stone rises around him in vast fragments, not as shield alone, but as extension of his movement. Earth itself becomes instrument. The first clash is not clean. It is structural. Sky pressure meets earth pressure, and the result is instability across multiple domains at once. Olympus trembles slightly, not in collapse, but in resonance. Athena moves immediately into position, her presence stabilizing perception around Zeus's focus. Poseidon senses disruption through deep subterranean and oceanic channels simultaneously. Hera observes the structural consequences rather than the conflict itself. And Apollo's vision collapses entirely into fragmented sensation without coherent future path. Zeus strikes. Thunder descends not in single bolt, but in layered sequence of force. Porphyrion responds by lifting Earth upward, redirecting impact through massive geological displacement. The collision does not behave like traditional battle. It behaves like opposing realities interacting. You feel the weight of it as shifting balance across existence. For a moment, neither side advances. The world itself stabilizes around the point of contact. Then Porphyrion presses forward, and Olympus feels the pressure directly. This is the closest the giants have come yet to divine threshold. Zeus resists, not retreating, not yielding, but adjusting force to counter structural intrusion. Athena reinforces boundary perception around Olympus. Poseidon shifts subterranean balance beneath sea and earth junctions. Hera strengthens internal coherence of divine order through presence alone. And yet Porphyrion continues pressing, not quickly, but inevitably. Ancient interpretations of this moment vary widely. Some describe it as Zeus's ultimate display of supremacy, others as coordinated divine resistance preventing collapse of order. Some suggest it represents symbolic tension between civilization and primordial force. But within the myth itself, meaning becomes secondary to pressure. And pressure continues. Porphyrion attempts to extend influence further upward. Stone rises in arcs that threaten Olympus's lower boundary. But Zeus responds with concentrated thunder that fractures those extensions before they fully form. The confrontation stabilizes into sustained equilibrium, neither side fully prevailing, neither retreating, only tension maintained at impossible scale. A final omen emerges within this section. Across multiple mortal regions, the sky is reported to flicker between brightness and shadow within single breaths, as if reality itself is momentarily uncertain which state to maintain. No storms follow. No destruction is recorded, but witnesses describe overwhelming sense that the world was briefly divided between two competing orders. On Olympus, Zeus and Porphyrion remain locked in structural opposition. Athena stands ready. Hera watches. Poseidon listens. Apollo cannot see forward. And beneath all of it, Gaia's influence continues to move through deeper layers of existence, where even this confrontation is not isolated. It is part of a larger unfolding that has no single center, only convergence. You remain within the suspended tension of Olympus, where Zeus and Porphyrion still press against each other at the edge of reality. The air feels compressed as if every breath must pass through resistance. And yet, something new begins to enter the myth. A second current, a mortal one. You descend quickly, drawn away from the clash of gods and giants, into the fragile world below, where destiny is still shaped by choice rather than pressure alone. Heracles is moving again, not wandering now, not observing, but following something that cannot be fully seen. The sky above him flickers faintly with instability, though mortals interpret it as distant atmospheric disturbance. He does not. He feels alignment shifting across unseen layers of existence, and for the first time, he understands that his actions are no longer separate from divine conflict. You walk beside him through open terrain where wind moves through tall grass in uneven patterns. The world feels slightly misaligned, as if distance itself is uncertain. Heracles stops. He lifts his bow again. But this time, there is no single target visible in mortal space. Only resonance, only pressure. And Athena's presence arrives once more, not physically, but as structured awareness shaping his perception. Not command, not force, but clarity. Aim not what is seen. Aim what is shaping what is seen. Heracles breathes slowly. The bowstring tightens. And in that moment, the boundary between mortal action and divine consequence becomes almost indistinguishable. You return upward briefly to Olympus. Zeus is still engaged with Porphyrion. Their confrontation has not resolved. It continues as sustained equilibrium of opposing forces. But now, something else enters the field. Not interruption, alignment. Zeus senses it immediately. Athena notices the shift in pressure. Even Porphyrion reacts slightly, as if something within the structure of conflict has changed. Far below, Heracles releases his arrow. It does not travel through ordinary space alone. It moves through convergence, through alignment of intention and structure, through the narrowing gap between mortal action and cosmic consequence. On Olympus, the effect is immediate, not explosive, but decisive. A disruption forms within Porphyrion's advancing pressure, not destruction of force, but interruption of coherence. The giant's upward motion stutters for the first time. Zeus reacts instantly. Thunder concentrates into focused strikes that exploit the momentary instability. Athena reinforces structural clarity around Olympus. Poseidon stabilizes deep foundations beneath sea and earth. Hera maintains order through sheer presence. And Porphyrion, for the first time, loses sustained momentum. Ancient traditions interpret this moment differently. Some say Heracles wounds Porphyrion directly with divine guidance from Zeus. Others say Athena directs the arrow as extension of strategy. Some accounts suggest the mortal act itself is what allows divine force to take effect. Historians continue to debate whether this reflects literal intervention or symbolic narrative of human participation in cosmic order. But within the myth, what matters is consequence. And consequence is immediate. Porphyrion's pressure weakens, not collapsing, but becoming unstable. Zeus capitalizes instantly. Thunder descends in layered force that was previously held in balance. Porphyrion is forced downward slightly for the first time since emergence. Not defeated, but disrupted. And in this disruption, the equilibrium shifts. You feel the myth pivot, because now divine resistance has gained a point of leverage. Heracles stands still after releasing the arrow. He does not see the full result, but he feels the change in atmosphere, as if the world itself has exhaled differently. Athena's presence reaches him briefly. Not praise, not instruction, but acknowledgement. The mortal has entered the structure of divine conflict. Below deeper layers, giants continue to rise, but the stability of their ascent has been altered. Not stopped, not reversed, but no longer uniform. Gaia's influence flows through them again. But now it encounters interference, multiple domains responding simultaneously. Olympus, sea, earth, mortal action, all intersecting at once. You return to the central confrontation. Zeus and Porphyrion remain locked in opposition. But the balance is no longer equal. Zeus presses forward, not overwhelming, but precise. Thunder becomes structured rather than expansive, focused rather than chaotic. Porphyrion attempts to reassert upward pressure, but instability within his form persists. Stone fractures unevenly across his body of earth and force. He is no longer fully cohesive. Athena senses the shift. Now, she says quietly, and Olympus responds, not a single act, but coordinated divine structure. Zeus intensifies pressure. Poseidon reinforces foundational stability across domains. Hera maintains coherence of divine order. Apollo, even without clarity, reinforces directional probability toward containment. The effect is cumulative. Porphyrion is pushed further downward, not destroyed, but contained. His presence remains, but his ascent is no longer continuous. A final omen appears within this section. Across distant regions, the sky briefly returns to natural clarity for several breaths, as if reality itself has regained temporary coherence. Then shifts again, not fully stable, but less fractured than before. On Olympus, Zeus does not declare victory, because he understands what has changed. Not the end of conflict, but the beginning of structure capable of resisting it. And beneath everything, Gaia continues to move through deeper layers of existence, where even disruption becomes part of larger design that no single domain fully controls. You remain in the aftermath of pressure still echoing through Olympus, where Porphyrion's force has been forced downward but not erased. The world is no longer in pure confrontation. It is in resolution, slow, uneven, and uncertain. You feel the transition first, not in sight, but in weight, as if the structure of existence is settling into a new configuration after strain. Far below, the giants continue to rise, but something essential has changed in their movement. They are no longer unified in momentum. Each step now carries resistance from multiple directions at once. Olympus above, sea beneath, earth itself shifting, and mortal action interfering in subtle but decisive ways. You descend again into the fractured world, where the remaining giants struggle against a reality that is no longer responding as a single, unified force. The landscape is scarred by earlier movement, collapsed caverns, shifting mountains, seafloor fractures where water and stone no longer maintain clean separation. Here, the giants are visible in their final stages of ascent, but their coherence is breaking apart, not in destruction alone, but in fragmentation of intent. One giant pushes upward against collapsing stone, but the stone now behaves inconsistently, sometimes yielding, sometimes resisting unpredictably. Another attempts to coordinate movement with others, but the shared awareness that once guided them has become distorted by interference from multiple realms. Gaia's influence still flows through them, but it is no longer singular. It is layered, and layers now conflict. You feel the final phase of Gigantomachy beginning to resolve, not as singular victory, but as structural collapse of unified emergence. Above, Olympus exerts sustained pressure. Zeus maintains focused control over thunder, no longer expansive but precise. Athena stabilizes perception around battlefield structure. Poseidon reinforces boundaries where earth and sea intersect. Hera maintains coherence of divine order at conceptual level. Apollo continues to interpret fragmented outcomes into partial clarity. And Heracles, though no longer directly acting, remains embedded in the outcome through residual effect of his intervention. You begin to understand that the war is no longer fought through single moments. It is maintained through continuous alignment. Below, giants begin to fall, not all at once, not in single dramatic collapse, but gradually, as their ascent becomes unsustainable under combined pressures. One giant attempts to press upward through fractured stone and sea-pressurized earth, but resistance from multiple domains converges. The structure fails to support continued movement. He is forced downward, not destroyed, but contained beneath collapsing layers. Another giant, attempting to rise through a volcanic ground, encounters sudden stabilization of terrain influenced by divine order. His movement halts, not permanently, but irreversibly within that moment of action. Enceladus, still bound in confrontation with Athena's structural clarity, elsewhere experiences full destabilization of his upward trajectory. Athena's containment does not erase him, but limits his expansion entirely within layered earth beneath volcanic regions. Ancient traditions later describe this as burial beneath mountains or confinement beneath volcanic islands. Historians interpret these accounts as mythologized explanation of seismic activity and eruptions. But within the myth itself, meaning is more direct. The giants are no longer ascending. They are being reabsorbed into structure. Gaia's influence shifts again, not withdrawn, but transformed. What was upward motion becomes internalized pressure. What was emergence becomes containment within Earth's deeper memory. You feel this transition as emotional tone within the myth itself. Not triumph alone, but stabilization after overwhelming instability. On Olympus, Zeus observes the final stages of collapse. He does not speak immediately, because what he is witnessing is not destruction of enemy alone, but reintegration of forces that had temporarily separated from balance. Athena speaks softly. It is ending. Zeus replies, "Yes." A pause follows. Then Hera adds something unexpected. Nothing ends fully when it belongs to the earth. Below, the last visible movements of the giants diminish. Stone settles. Pressure disperses. Layers of earth reorganize into more stable configuration. Some giants are fully buried beneath mountains. Others beneath sea-bound geological layers. Others remain suspended in deep subterranean chambers, no longer advancing but not erased. Their presence persists, but no longer as active force. The Gigantomachy reaches its conclusion in structure rather than annihilation. A final omen appears in this section. Across Greece, mountains are reported to feel heavier for a brief period, as if settling into new positions after long strain. Then stability returns, not perfect, but sufficient. On Olympus, silence follows, not absence of sound, but completion of sustained tension. Zeus finally lowers his gaze from the horizon. Athena steps back into calm observation. Poseidon senses stabilization across domains. Hera remains watchful, aware that equilibrium always carries potential for future imbalance. And beneath everything, Gaia continues to exist as underlying structure of world itself. Not victorious, not defeated, but unchanged in essence. Because in myth, even resolution becomes part of memory, and memory remains active beneath all things. You remain suspended in the quiet that follows overwhelming motion. Not true silence, but the kind of silence that arrives when the world has finally stopped resisting itself. Across Greece, the signs of conflict begin to fade. Not abruptly, but gradually, like waves losing strength after distant storms. The giants are no longer rising. Their pressure has been absorbed into layers of earth, sea, and stone that now hold them in place. Yet the world does not feel empty. It feels rearranged. You move through this new stillness where valleys have subtly shifted, coastlines feel slightly redefined, and mountains carry an unfamiliar sense of weight, as if remembering the strain they just endured. Mortals do not fully understand what has happened. They never truly witnessed the war in its totality. Only fragments, disturbances, omen without explanation. And now those fragments begin to settle into interpretation. In villages, people speak in hushed tones about the days when the earth felt alive beneath their feet. Some describe it as divine punishment, others as protection. Others still refuse to give it a name at all, because naming something too clearly risks misunderstanding its nature. You return once more to Olympus. The great halls remain intact. Marble columns still rise with eternal precision. Torchlight still burns with steady divine fire. But something within the atmosphere has changed. The urgency is gone. In its place, a quiet awareness. Zeus stands at the edge of the terrace, overlooking the world below. He does not speak for a long time. Athena remains nearby. Poseidon's presence is distant, no longer strained. Hera observes in silence that feels less like tension and more like assessment. Apollo's visions have not fully restored clarity, but they are no longer fracturing. And Ares, for once, is not restless, only still. Zeus finally speaks. The giants are no longer ascending. Athena responds, but they are not gone. A pause. Hera adds quietly, they have become part of what holds the world together. This statement carries a deeper meaning than simple conclusion. Because in Greek myth, defeat does not always mean removal. Often it means transformation of state. What once moved freely now becomes structure. What once resisted becomes foundation. You descend again into the deeper world beneath Olympus. And here you sense it clearly. The giants remain, not as active forces, but as embedded presence within Earth's structure. Some are held beneath mountains that now feel heavier than before. Others beneath seabeds where pressure has stabilized into new equilibrium. Others within deep geological layers where movement is no longer possible but existence continues. They are not erased. They are contained within memory of the world itself. Gaia's presence flows through all of it. But now it is quieter, less directional, more integrated, as if she is no longer guiding motion, but holding the result of motion within herself. You feel the myth shifting tone, not toward victory, but toward balance achieved through tension finally resolved. Above mortals begin to rebuild routines. Fields are replanted. Fishing resumes. Temples are repaired where needed. But everywhere there remains subtle awareness that something beneath existence has changed permanently. People speak less about fear now, and more about memory, about how the world once felt unstable, and how it has now settled into a new form they cannot fully describe. On Olympus, Zeus remains at the terrace. Athena joins him. She speaks softly. This will be remembered differently in every generation. Zeus replies, that is always true. A pause. Then Athena adds, but the earth will remember it only one way. Zeus looks outward, not toward victory, not toward defeat, but toward continuity, because what has occurred is not an ending. It is incorporation into structure of reality itself. Poseidon senses stability returning across oceans and seabeds. Apollo's visions begin to reform into coherent sequences again, though they carry echoes of fragmentation. Hera remains aware that balance is never permanent, only maintained. And even Ares, though silent, understands that conflict does not disappear. It changes form. You feel the final layers of the myth settling. The Gigantomachy is no longer active event. It has become embedded history, a structural memory within the world. A final omen appears in this section. Across Greece, earthquakes cease not suddenly but gradually, as if the earth is exhaling after long strain. Then stillness returns, not fragile, but stable enough to continue. Zeus speaks once more almost to himself. The world has survived its own resistance. Athena does not correct him, because both truth and simplicity coexist in that statement. And beneath everything deep within layers of earth, sea, and stone, the giants remain, not as enemies, not as victors, but as enduring presence within the foundation of a world that now remembers what it has contained. You do not return to battle now. You return to reflection. The world has already shifted into its new form, and what remains is not motion, but interpretation. You walk through a Greece that feels familiar again, yet subtly different in ways that cannot be easily named. Mountains still stand where they always stood. Rivers still trace their ancient paths. Temples still rise toward the sky in quiet devotion. But beneath everything, there is awareness, a sense that the world has survived something that cannot be fully seen anymore, only remembered. You move through sanctuaries where priests offer thanks, not for victory alone, but for stability restored. Incense rises slowly through stone chambers. Oil lamps flicker against carved reliefs depicting battles that no longer feel distant. They feel foundational, not history in the ordinary sense, but structure beneath understanding. Ancient Greek myth never treated the Gigantomachy as only war. It was memory encoded as meaning, a way of explaining how order exists at all, how the sky remains above the earth, how boundaries are maintained between forces that constantly seek to overlap. You stand before a painted amphora in a quiet temple. It depicts Zeus standing against rising forms of stone and shadow, Athena beside him, Heracles in motion, giants pressing upward from fractured ground. The image is not chaos. It is arrangement, a moment frozen into understanding. And yet even here interpretation is not singular. Different city-states told the story differently. Some emphasized divine triumph. Others emphasized balance. Some saw moral structure. Others saw cosmic necessity. And some simply saw warning. You feel all these interpretations existing simultaneously, layered like sediment in Earth itself. Because myth does not resolve into one meaning. It accumulates meaning over time. You continue through the mortal world. And now people are speaking differently about what they experienced. Not only fear, not only awe, but reflection. Farmers say the earth felt awake during those days. Sailors describe the sea as listening. Travelers report that mountains felt closer, as if presence itself had changed scale. No one agrees on exact meaning, but all agree on change. And change in ancient understanding is never neutral. It always carries implication. You return to Olympus one final time within this section. The atmosphere there is no longer tense. But it is no longer naive either. Zeus stands with Athena and Hera. Poseidon's presence is steady but distant, as if still listening to layers beneath the sea. Apollo's visions have regained coherence, though they carry residue of fragmentation like memory of uncertainty that cannot be fully erased. Zeus speaks first. The war is no longer present. A pause. It is remembered. Athena responds, and memory shapes what follows. Hera adds quietly, memory is how order survives change. This is the deeper meaning of the Gigantomachy within mythic tradition. Not simply defeat of giants, but integration of instability into structure. The earth does not forget what it endured. It incorporates it. You descend once more beneath perception into the deeper layers of world where giants remain contained. They are no longer moving upward, but they are not inert. They exist within geological memory, within pressure that stabilizes mountains, within subterranean tension that holds continents in place. Some traditions suggest their presence explains volcanic activity. Others suggest earthquakes are reminders of their continued existence. Historians continue to debate how literal or symbolic these interpretations are. But within myth, both ideas coexist without contradiction. Because myth does not require singular explanation, it requires resonance. You feel Gaia within all of this, not as victor, not as defeated force, but as enduring structure of world that contains both creation and constraint. The world is stable now. But stability is not absence of force. It is balance of forces held in alignment. You sense the final reflection forming across Olympus and Earth alike. Zeus understands it. Athena understands it. Even Hera understands it in her own way. That what has been achieved is not elimination of chaos, but integration of it into structure that can endure. A final image appears. Across Greece, people begin carving new depictions of mountains in temples and shrines, not as background, but as memory of resistance. Stone remembers stone, earth remembers pressure, and sky remains above not because it cannot fall, but because it has learned how to hold. The myth settles, not into ending, but into continuity. And in that continuity, the giants remain present, not as threat, but as foundation beneath everything that stands. You arrive now at the final movement of the myth where even time itself begins to soften its urgency. The world is no longer in conflict. It is in remembrance. And remembrance in ancient understanding is never passive. It breathes quietly beneath everything that follows. You walk through Greece as evening settles across land and sea. The sky is calm again, though not untouched. Clouds drift in slow formations that no longer feel uncertain. Mountains stand with renewed stability. Rivers continue their ancient paths without hesitation. And yet beneath this restored balance, something deeper remains. You can feel it in the silence between sounds, in the way the earth now feels less like a surface, and more like a memory holding itself together. Zeus stands alone on Olympus, not as distant ruler in triumph, but as witness to what has become part of the world itself. Athena is nearby, her presence steady, no longer sharpened by immediate conflict. Hera watches from a quieter distance, her awareness focused not on war, but on what structures endure after war. Poseidon feels the sea stabilize in layered stillness beneath shifting currents of memory. Apollo's visions have become calm again, though they now carry depth that suggests understanding shaped by experience rather than certainty. And Ares, for once, does not seek motion, only recognition. Zeus speaks softly. "The giants are not gone," Athena replies. "They are no longer separate." A pause follows. Then Hera adds something that lingers longer than the words themselves. "They are what the world remembers when it learns how to hold itself together." You feel the meaning of this, not as conclusion, but as transformation, because in Greek myth, endings rarely erase. They integrate. You descend once more beneath perception, where the giants remain within Earth structure, not moving, not rising, but existing as embedded presence within Stone Mountain and deep geological memory. They are not prisoners. They are not defeated enemies in the simple sense. They are part of the world's stability now, pressure that holds continents in balance, memory that strengthens structure through containment. Gaia remains everywhere within this, not speaking, not acting, but enduring as the foundation of continuity itself. You begin to understand what ancient listeners may have understood when hearing this myth by firelight. That order is never absence of force. It is force arranged into harmony. Above mortals return fully to their lives. But something has changed in how they tell stories. They no longer speak of chaos as external threat alone. They speak of balance, of tension beneath stability, of the unseen weight that allows mountains to remain standing, and of the sky that holds itself above the world, not by permanence alone, but by equilibrium. You return one final time to Olympus. Zeus looks outward across the horizon, and for a long moment he says nothing. Then quietly, almost to the world itself, he speaks. The earth remembers what it has contained. Athena responds softly, and becomes stronger for it. Hera adds, or more careful, "There is no disagreement, only layered truth, because all are correct within their own perspective. The Gigantomachy is no longer an event unfolding. It is structure embedded in reality. Thunder no longer represents conflict alone. It represents memory of conflict. Stone no longer represents stillness alone. It represents history held in place, and the world in its final quiet form carries both. You feel the narrative slow now, not ending abruptly, but settling, like dust returning to stone after long disturbance, like wind easing across mountains that have finally stopped trembling. The final image is not victory, it is continuity. Zeus remains above, the giants remain within, Gaia remains beneath all things. And the world continues not because it is unchallenged, but because it has learned how to hold its own tension without breaking. The last thought arrives gently like distant thunder fading into memory rather than sound. In ancient Greece, they would not say the war ended. They would say the world endured. And in that endurance, everything that came before continues to exist, not as past, but as foundation. Now the sky is quiet. The earth is still. And even the memory of thunder feels like something that belongs to the world, rather than something that happened to it. You can rest now, because even myths like worlds eventually learn how to hold silence without fear. And beneath that silence, everything continues to exist exactly as it must.